Welcome back, everyone, to GSL Group Cast. We got Group A finally being cast by moi. It was played like a week ago, but I was then traveling, so I didn't really get a chance to do that, and then only just now getting really back into the swing of things. So we'll get Group A and Group B out, hopefully lickety splits, and then apparently groups are actually only being played once a week this season, which I think is fine because there's so few days of GSL. I recently learned that. Now, if you guys didn't recognize it, now you do. So I'll try and get a little more on schedule for this, but as always, if you would like to support the Korean players, you would support the GSL, if you want your access to your replays, or these replays for yourself, that is, then you could always go to patreon.com/GSL. And with that out of the way, let's get into this first group, this first preliminary match of the group. In the bottom right, it is Maru going for forward racks. And in the top left, we do have soO. That is one forward racks, but then there is a second much forward racks. It is forwarder. I did not even see the SCV go out there. But all right, that is an interesting decision. So this is going to be a 2 racks that you would typically see. Either, well, fully proxied, I guess, would be Marines, obviously, but then 2 racks for Reapers, which this should be, would usually be used to completely wall off a map like Hard Lead. With this slightly faster Reaper popping up from the second racks is actually going to be able to produce the Reaper, get it across the map faster. And this Overlord was so freaking close to seeing it, too. I mean, you know, it'd be nice for soO to see that there is a second racks building, because you would really know based off that timing what it is. And without a second racks anywhere close to it, you would know that it's not a 2 racks Marine, it is a Reaper. And so that's nice just for the mental preparation part, but I was going to say, it actually might have been okay if you had just seen that it was a forward racks in general and saw that it was a Reaper popping out, but that Overlord spent so much time checking for 2 racks, it actually didn't see the forward position, just sees a Reaper pop out. Not sure you could really guess what position that barracks in based off that timing, but you see no second Reapers, so you might be thinking, okay, it's only just one, maybe it's a high ground 1 racks as well, and then suddenly a second one shows up, and pretty quickly, especially if you had scouted that it was only a single one. But it's kind of like a weird lack of scouting is almost helping soO, not quite, but almost. Obviously, if he could scout every portion of this build, that would be nicer, but is unlikely and certainly didn't happen in this game. But he didn't get tricked by seeing 1 racks up here, you know, and going maybe a little bit greedier if he'd only assumed it was 1 racks. He could have, from the beginning, actually, assumed it was going to be 2, because I believe a couple of Terran players do like doing the 2 racks opener on this map in particular. Maru does seem to throw it out every just once in a while. I'm going to start off a best of 3, trying to get that momentum started. Doesn't really do so. A couple of links from soO went across the map. I mean, Maru wasn't really heavily dedicating to the Reaper aggression anyways in the main base, but soO has lost a drone and 3 lings, which I would say is pretty acceptable. You know, one of the barracks is proxied, so it's not necessarily helping back at home to build add-ons, or obviously to go into a very dangerous follow-up, such as like a 4 racks, I suppose, something like that. That would be delayed or have less Marines. So I would say this is very acceptable. Now, when we look at this, and I think we all can see that we would favor Maru. soO is still rusty. It can't be the right word because he's been playing again for so long. But soO is definitely not up to what he used to be, which would be one of the contenders to Maru, unless it was a finals in which soO would always lose. Yeah. But anyway, he's a far cry away from that. And so we look at this, and Maru is the heavy favorite, especially with his results in Katowice, kind of reminding us how good he is, despite having a very poor GSL season 2 or 3, whatever it was, the last GSL of last year. So Katowice was kind of one of those, like, well, is he actually kind of slouching? What's going on here? Because Atlanta wasn't good, GSL wasn't good, but Katowice got second place, obviously kicking butt in the matchup. And so soO, I mean, really getting the, you know, as expected, when you see the name Maru, he is the first seed, I suppose. He is the first guy you would think is going to win GSL. So soO's really having a tough time right off the bat as far as the draw, as far as the group, but as far as the game, totally fine. Calm under pressure. showing his championship status. That's buckling under the willpower, I suppose, that Maru sometimes can exert on people, or just seems like he's destined to win. Like Ragnarok, for instance. It just, you know, like Ragnarok's a perfectly good player, but against Maru, not so much. And soO is actually even going to bring the aggression to Maru here, so he's opting for a little bit of a roach opener. So 7 roaches on the way, Ravager being created, and thus far, Maru's little hit squad that is also a scouting squad has not done its job as far as scouting. It actually even does kind of a subpar job dealing with the Lings. It took forever to deal with them, and 2 Hellions were severely injured. Not that they're going to help against roaches all that much. 1 Liberator is a bad sign, I would say, for Maru. I would rather have that be a Banshee, which is actually maneuverable, but at least the Liberator can try and go behind this little barracks and starport wall. Now that's Tech Lab being on the front is awfully concerning. If the barracks dies, that upgrade is canceled, by the way, guys. Or you could just try and get the Tech Lab itself. Either way, Roaches and Ravagers actually being kind of sandwiched here, and a little bit of an awkward Ravager creation underneath the Liberator means that we're still not at the magic number of 3 Ravagers. That is what's going to one-shot the Liberator. Finally getting up to that, but then one of the Ravagers very, very weak. Maru handling this about as well as possible, I would say. You know, Stim does finish. Starport production, barracks production is going to be delayed, but they're not going to die. It was not a full-on committal from the Zerg player, so you do have to take that into account. Was Maru still caught off enough by that? I would say no, actually. Like, that was really nice handling. The very, very thick wall did actually end up helping. Didn't end up causing him to lose out on Stim, which really was the major concern. The Ravager count didn't get to that very, very good 3 counts until, I mean, it was already defended against. And that Liberator actually was able to be a lot more useful than usual. So, I don't know, all things considered, feel like Maru's in a good place. But soO did take that time behind just the Roach creation to go ahead and build a lot of drones. So, Maru is going to be looking for some damage with the drop so far, finding just the army. Taking away a lot of those Lings, however, could be good for the future, as Lings are obviously the fastest thing that soO has to respond to the drops that Maru will now be sending out. Suddenly you're out of Lings and you only have Roach Ravager, and actually even then, the Ravagers might even be vulnerable. I was going to say that they're too slow, but they also might be vulnerable. Case in point, one of them does get gunned down. Behind it, Maru takes his 3rd CC, now building triple SCVs to get back up on the income, try and match the pace that soO has set. Liberator also able to find a little bit of damage, but actually taken down probably probably not the most effective Liberator, but it did help on the defense as well, so I'll give it a pass. 4 hatches almost done. And soO is in a solid economy state with 10, 11 more drones on the way, clearly transferring over into Ling, Baneling, and then perhaps a decent amount of Ravagers. I'm a little concerned, I guess, for the overall state of things. soO had that gap of supply and that gap of income that we were like, okay, maybe that's decent enough behind the aggression, but I'm looking at the macro and I'm getting a little concerned, not seeing all of the resources being spent. And I'm looking at the lack of Banelings and a not scary number of Roaches. And I'm wondering if Maru does have an army to combat that. Not quite, as he does need more of this bio to be up and running, but 3 tanks already, 2nd factory coming down. We'll certainly have a hefty number of splash units. Armory's coming down as well, as he will advance his upgrades and probably stay just a little bit farther ahead of soO. Although once again, soO's bank is going to make it easier for him to immediately start 2-2. He at least starts centrifugal hooks. He could start 2-2 and hive, actually. he has enough bank to do that. Currently not, though. Just focusing on building up the army. I mean, larva is a huge issue, apparently. It should be a little less of an issue if you are building roaches, but obviously soO is trying to move away from roaches. And I guess, not you know, because of that, not spending all of his money. Now it's looking a little bit better. But there's the hive, there's the 2-2. All right, there we go, there we go. And actually, it does end up being faster than Maru, who's a little gas light here. So he even prioritizes +1 tank, or is that a priority, or did he just not realize he didn't start +2 armor? Uh-oh. You know, as a priority over +2 armor, though, I actually like that a lot. I think that was intentional. I'm going to say it was intentional. I do like that a lot, because it does seem to still be a rather heavy Roach Ravager army. And even if it wasn't, I mean, he is clearly dedicating to he was dedicating to a decent number of tanks. Now might be adding on Widow Mines, and perhaps that +1 Won't be so rewarding as if you had like 8 tanks, because obviously wouldn't mind someone take advantage of it, but I still kind of like the idea. Drilling Claw's on the way anyway. 4th base on the way as well. No, 4th base is already going over to the location. That's a 5th base coming down from Maru. We got ourselves a macro game going on. soO now maxed out. I can say he is now comfortable with the bank that he has. 82 drones, 5 bases, hive done, upgrades on the way, a unit land starting up lickety-split. Not realizing a drop over to the right side was about to hit his base, and that's a little unfortunate. 7 drones do go down, but overall, very recoverable. And the creep spread is also something that you do have to talk about here. Maru has been trying to hit the bases of soO for so many of these drops and kind of run-bys that it actually really has not been clearing up the creep spread, particularly in the middle of the map. Now, the outside, the wings, if you will, maybe are still missing some creep, so you can't realize, oh, okay, the dropped over here, right? But down the middle is still very scary, because at some point soO will be the aggressor. At some point Maru is going to be the one that's kind of sitting back more so. Maybe he's not going to extremely turtle, but nonetheless there's going to be a push and pull, and soO will eventually be the one to push. And if he's literally jumping off this creep when he breaks down the rocks here, already hitting your 3rd, I mean, it's scary. Hard lead gets to be a small map very quickly. The Ghosts are on the way, some Vikings are even on the way, and Maru does seem to be setting up for the long haul. Seems like soO has read this game correctly as far as trying to get to that late game. Or maybe Maru did more so. Either way, they both did it. They both decided not to go for any type of mid-game push. soO could have delayed that hive, could have gone into a maxed out situation and tried to even hit him with pure roach as opposed to trying to transfer over into banelings, but I don't think that would have been necessarily a good idea. And it is into late game for both players. 6 bases now for soO. 5th base is coming up and actually seen by this Overlord, which somehow didn't die at any point. Just been chilling over this pervert pillar for a long time. How'd you survive? Anyway, it did see the transfer, but it's not exactly a surprise, is it? 2-2's now done for the Terran, +1 vehicle weapons. And I do think having like basically 4 tanks is actually a really nice number for this kind of late game turtle style. Maybe even upwards to 5 or 6 we've seen, and then Widow Mines also scattered around. I do like that they still got that +1 vehicle armor. Weapons and armor is on the way. This attack is going to find some decent trades. I don't know. If it doesn't kill this planetary, then maybe not. And it's not going to kill the planetary. It did take down 2 of the tanks, 2 of the liberators, and some of the bio, but that was just a little bit of an appetizer, which is why I wasn't too hype about it. soO thought he had an opportunity where maybe Maru wasn't even paying attention. Not necessarily the case. And this 1 tank on the low ground here is also really nicely placed for that exact type of attack. Now, we're going to have to see many more attacks of that nature, and often paired up with another attack to really start feeling good about the Zerg situation. Medevac's finally taken care of. I think all of them have now been killed on soO's side of the map, so nothing to worry about back at home as he finishes up his 3-3. Chitin splitting, Burrow, Spires on the way as well. Finally going to tear down these rocks. Again, having a very fast jumping off point to hit this 3rd base, which is going to be the most vulnerable, as it is an orbital, not a planetary, but is still going to be fairly well protected, as this is not exactly a huge leap from 5th to 3rd to defend it, right? In fact, it actually would be a little bit more difficult to go over to this 4th, for instance, defend that, and then also be hit at that 3rd. And then also, we could have a Nidus Swarm, and that's really the magic trifecta right there. Nidus Swarm and then 2 bases under attack. Even the top Terrans will have some difficulty with that, and will often have to say, okay, 1 place has to be abandoned temporarily while I deal with the other 2 things. But soO doesn't actually have a Nidus Swarm yet. Might be a missing component to the late game recipe here. We'll see. Maybe just direct attacks will work, but I gotta say, Maru's in one of the prime Maru positions. Alright, and when Maru is in a prime late-game Maru position, I don't think many Zerg players can actually kill him. A couple of Widow Mines are not going to pop off, but overall, again, this isn't going to find the connection with the Ghosts, and it's definitely not going to break the Terran, not getting anywhere close to the production. In fact, a lot of the bio came in from the north side. A little surprising there for soO. Does end up pouncing on top of it. The Marines and Marauders all getting slaughtered, but the Ghosts do remain strong. Overseers had all been killed, so the Ghosts were not going to be touched. 21 SCVs do go down, natural consequence of the way that you have to defend this base, but that's an easy fix. He does have 6, 7, 8 command center, something like that, so he could be producing SCVs whenever he wants to, or he could choose not to produce SCVs, because he's still at 68 after that damage was done. And does have the extra orbitals for mules. We know the gist for Terran players, right? So that's exactly what Maru is apparently doing. Not replacing those SCVs, which also means he's going to have a much bigger army count. What that army purely consists of is obviously up to him. He could add more Ghosts, he could add more tanks, he could add more Thors, actually, and Hellbats. We did see kind of this very, very, very late game transition over into mech. If we get to, let's say, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes, I suppose. But so far, just adding in a couple of Hellbats, not so much that full transfer. Which it does feel like that's also kind of come and gone. You know, we've seen very, very late game TVZs, and we haven't really seen that transfer over into Hellbat Thor. Either because it ends up not being the best thing, or because these games have often been so action-packed that it really seems unlikely you can transfer over to that. Oh, we got another attack, this time with Ultralisk, but the Ghosts once again are safe, and most of the snipes do go off. Banelings do connect into the heart of little Bio Ball there, so that was pretty efficient trade, but overall, Maru is going to hold on, and even though he does take the bigger dip, and actually gas is a big concern there for Maru, he is going to be able to recover at least once more, but this is really the important time for soO. If he can remax and actually get another blow here, then it might be the killing blow. Because Maru is naturally going to remax slower as a Terran player, but then also if he is struggling on one of these resources, so either minerals or gas. Now the gas comes in back quickly as I'm speaking, suddenly just has 500 after being down at 30, but yeah, that is the concern. soO tries to take these other bases, the bottom left, the middle right, but so far Maru's been able to deny that. Now, this might be the biggest issue for soO as the game goes on, the inability to find these bases. We don't have a ton of them on hard lead, but soO still has so much mining to do on the bases that he does have, and I'm really not worried about that yet. There is the Remax coming in once again. Maru at a pretty solid 180. Army supply actually very similar, and this time I think Maru is better set up to deal with this. Bit more of a spread on his bio. Ghost even safer than before. One tank helping out a lot against the Banelings as well. You do hear some Ghosts cry out as they do get taken down, but most of them still alive. Gonna get a lot of revenge snipes as well. Lings and Banelings and Ultras still available, but the Ultras only temporarily, right? Then they get deleted by the snipes. And with the Banelings all gone, that is going to be it for the Ultras. They will evacuate. Lings left to die as they do the damage as cracklings to the infrastructure. Totally fine. Very cheap resource there for soO, who is trying to actually get his Lings across the map to at least stop some of the expansions from going down. It's not Lings that are stopping this from going down, it's Corruptors. And then Sneaky Infestor also sharking our way around the third base. It does not appear that Maru is aware of that. I don't believe the Infestors have actually showed themselves at all. There was one hanging around here, I guess in case Maru's army ended up chasing too much, but then it ended up just basically taking care of things at home. So I don't believe it actually appeared, which means that we're going to have at least one juicy fungal before the Terran player goes, oh right, burrowed Infestors, and starts planting missile turrets everywhere. That's why I'm thinking this one's going to get a pretty good one, actually. This Infestor is in a really nice position. Oh, double Infestor. Either side seems almost guaranteed to be able to get a good shot. Widowmine Field is rather intimidating, but nice job from soO to at least get one or two popped off. Oh, the scan is absolutely perfect. Oh, Maru actually remembering before the fungal went down. Good on him, because they do so often. A Terran player is like, oh yeah, Infestors in the late game. My bad, forgot about that. But they are going to become, I think, even more and more popular as we see people use them so effectively. So good on Maru for that scan. Once again, scanning his army to make sure he doesn't get surprised fungal, but the Infestor still is going to come in with a fungal. Not particularly good, though. I mean, it was something, but the Zerg army had already been deleted. The thick wall there of Ghosts and Marauders left behind a bloody mess on the front there. And 12 SCVs is really the only thing that went down, as it seems like anyway. Clearly, Bio still went down, maybe some Liberators as well, as Maru is having a tough time remaxing. But then soO is also finally hitting a point where it's not free remaxes. He doesn't have 2,000 in the bank, and he's the one that instantly remaxes, and Maru slowly gets his way up there. Now they're both kind of struggling to get back up in supply. But it's always worth considering that Maru's army supply is often the one that is left still very strong. It's his SCVs that are taking the damage that are getting lower and lower and are reflecting in his overall supply that we're kind of like, oh, that's not a good overall supply. It's not, but it is workable. And if Maru can get this base up and running, then this is actually really scary for soO. Despite the 30 supply difference here, it is all in workers, guys. If this base gets up and running, soO is in a lot of trouble. He's going to try and break through here, but this is already a really well set up Maru. The Marauders tank wonderfully on the front lines. Again, a tank in a wonderful position. Ghost able to spread out. No infestors involved right there by the looks of things, right? I don't think this one ever got close enough. But oh no, it's so close! Now it was close enough, but it actually wasn't controlled first. It was this one that was controlled first. Got the tail end of a couple of Ghost Fungal, but really not the most effective. And that was actually kind of a clumsy attack over and over again. I mean, off of creep into the high ground, into a Terran army that was clearly being controlled. And then the Infestors were not really as well positioned as it seems like soO thought they would be. And then he actually, I guess, was still focusing on this Infestor and didn't use the one that was a little bit closer. A very, very small detail, but I think kind of an important one, because the Infestor that was closer might have gotten, let's say, 5 Ghosts Fungaled instead of just 2. And maybe that's not, that actually might still not be enough to really change the course of this game, guys, but I'm nitpicking, I suppose. Because, as far as the course of this game, Zerg did not break the Terran. The Terran has officially gotten this bottom left base up and running, and that is terrible news for a Zerg player who not only didn't break it, but also really didn't break it. That was actually just straight up losses there from the Zerg player. Really not a great attack. But even if it was a decent attack that traded okay, the fact that a Terran player has another base when you are in need of all the bases you can get, as a Zerg player is already bad news. So, just doubly bad news at this point. Is soO also is very unlikely to be able to get this base up and running for more than like a minute. He can try and have his drones on standby to immediately saturate it as much as he would like, but oh my god, that Widow Mine was amazing. Oh my god, a second Widow Mine. Oh no. Oh, okay, well, soO is kind of, yeah, I feel like that was the morale. You just saw it sink right there. Those 2 Widow Mines got like 30 plus units. Jesus. soO, I feel like soO is actually very close to tipping Maru off the edge. Maru is, yeah, I've said this before, but there's times where you see a Terran player doing like the windmill action as they try and not fall off the edge. I feel like Maru was windmilling a little bit. And there was a time where it was actually looking kind of concerning, but soO wasn't able to really deliver the 1, 2, 3 punch. So still a very impressive game from soO, who I just think is actually like a severe underdog coming in here. But maybe I'm underestimating soO or overestimating Maru, whatever one. See what happens in game 2. Map number 2 is going to be on Site Delta. Top left Maru, bottom right soO. As I was saying, soO actually played a pretty damn decent game. I really expect Maru to take the reins of a TVZ against soO and then just kind of deliver a killing blow maybe around the mid game. Instead, soO kind of force him into the late game. I mean, the Roach aggression that really did tie things up for Maru. It's not that it did a tremendous amount of damage, but it did force a reaction, obviously, and then you had to worry about the follow-up from the Zerg player, and Maru wouldn't be able to know exactly what it was until he got more scouting, and more scouting was hopefully more drops, and the drops were getting some scouting done. They weren't doing a whole lot of damage, and yes, of course, the Zerg player behind such light aggression, decent number of Roaches. Ravagers were built, but not an all-in, right? Did drone a lot. And as the Terran player in that circumstance, you really don't want to make the mistake of thinking that you can find a weak point in the greed that follows an attack when actually the Zerg player isn't being greedy. And then you just throw the game away at that point, basically. And so the safer call would, I would say, often be just to play out the macro game, especially if you're confident that you're going to win the macro game anyway. And soO is definitely known as a Roach Boy back in his prime. So, while maybe Solar, you could guess, would just be trying to macro his way to the late game, and maybe he could be a little more adventurous with like a very dedicated attack from the Terran player, like bring your tanks, bring your bio, do a push. I mean, even that is kind of dangerous to do. These Zerg players have gotten very good at reading the situation. So we get to the late game, right? soO headed there with, I feel like kind of like, maybe slightly worse macro, but he did get there, and then the macro mistakes didn't matter anymore. And for Maru, He had clearly just decided to play into that 5 bases with the tank set up defensively. You never see the splash units move out aggressively. The Terran player is taking a very macro approach to the game. Well, we got a 1-Rax that is truly a 1-Rax this time. I think yet again, soO not too brave at the Overlord as far as sending it across the map instantly. Last game, it was meandering and looking for proxy racks, so it didn't even scout the forward racks. Like I said, it was kind of a weird situation where there could have been a mind game if scouting was actually done on the forward placement of the barracks, but then there was no scout, so there was no mind game. That's kind of a benefit, I suppose, of no scouting. In this case, it would be very true. This is actually just the 1-Rack, and that would be very obvious at this point. The Lings will sacrifice themselves for a hot second, if they even have to. Oh, well, I don't know about that. I was going to say they might even have to sacrifice themselves. Then they thought they could actually take on 2 Marines. Technically, 4 Lings do take on 2 Marines if the Marines are surrounded. But, you know, that very, 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 very small detail. In the grand scheme of things, super unimportant. But anyway, he did scout that it is a Hellion follow-up, or at least a factory follow-up. Could be Cyclones first, could be Cyclones second, and it is going to be Cyclones second. But nonetheless, 2 Hellions, 2 Cyclones. Actually kind of vulnerable to being surrounded by an okay number of Lings. By okay, I mean like 10. And this is why I've not been a super big fan of this opener. It feels like it fails more often than not. Maybe soO thought he could run past the Marines with slow Lings. Because he does so now with speedlings, and that makes sense. He gets into the main. Unfortunately, it's kind of an awkward timing. So, well, what he sees is that it's on a 3cc after factory, so I guess that is still a scout. But, his starport was building, the Hellions still building, the barracks is still building. As far as it being a 3cc confirmed, I'd actually say they didn't actually scout it. There's still a chance that 2 barracks get thrown down, and it's a 2-base build. Unlikely in today's meta, and probably the only player who it would be likely to see do that would be someone like Bjorn, but nonetheless something you would have to be concerned about. I suppose it also didn't see that it was an armory, so that actually, again, Bjorn would be more likely to do a Hellbat push than Maru, but still. But as good a scout as you're going to ask for. Now it's 4 Hellions, and even the 2 Marines have joined in. The 4 Hellions will do a much better job at guarding this army from being surrounded. It could still happen, and that is a decent amount of Lings right there. They are going to actually intercept the inner reinforcements. That is pretty damn good. But in doing so, also reveal their attempt to go for the surround. So at this point, Maru should be microing. The Hellions are dealing enough damage. Maybe they will survive. Maybe they will be enough, or maybe not. Just kidding. They aren't going to be enough. The Cyclones are just not very useful in those situations. As you can see. 1 Ling survives. Oh, Liberator did get that distraction. Enough to get 3 drones and survive. So, all right. As far as the distraction, that was pretty effective. And as far as the trade, that was also still pretty effective. It would have been nicer for Maru to be the one to have the units left over, of course, but with only 1 Ling left over for soO, I'd say that's a trade. Holy shit, the Liberator actually survived. It's got 3 health on it and no Queen in sight. That will actually be able to go back and repair. How about that? It was a 3rd CC. As I said, very unlikely for Terrans to do 2 base at this point, unless your name is Bjorn. A 3cc into the additional barracks. Gas is coming up here. Sorry, not gas, is engineering base. I assume gas is very soon. There we go. And it is going into a decent mid-game, isn't it? soO has not taken economic damage, but he did have to build the army to deal with that attack. He did lose 2 queens as well, defending against those Cyclones. And as such, a perfect game for the Zerg player, but pretty solid, obviously going into Ling Bailing this game as well. No roaches in sight. Liberator? No. That Liberator might be back into play, but that is actually a medevac drop full of 4 Widow Mines. Getting into, I can only presume, is the natural. Nothing's going to be able to see that until this Overlord over here, so we'll see if soO is paying attention. It's the only thing happening on the map, so I would say it's likely that soO defends against this. Doesn't have Cloak, it doesn't have Drilling Claws, so it's really not the scariest Widow Mine drop I've ever seen. A very quick reaction indeed. Okay, well, he didn't pull the drones. Alright. Didn't pull the drones as fast as I was expecting, and the Ling split was a little last second as well, but you know what? He does split. he does pull the drones, and a queen is the biggest loss of that drop. Meanwhile, Maru loses 4 Widow Mines and a medevac. So I would say that was not very good at all from Maru. He did get a little bit of scouting as well, always worth noting, I guess, but so yeah, that wasn't too great. Maru wanted something to get on the map. He got it, even though it didn't do a whole lot of damage. Liberator is now the other thing doing something else besides this push, and so that once again might find a couple of surprising drone damage. Baneling Hydra is on the way. soO's Hydra stand coming in after the Widow Mine drop, so Maru did not scout that. And they got Maru focusing on the creep clear up in the middle of the map. Yeah, Lings don't necessarily want to tackle that, especially as 1-1 is done for the Terran, as well as combat shields. But with Banelings, it looks a lot better. Banelings are going to have to split, and they do. Yep, actually, yeah, pretty decently. And the drop cleans up yet another creep tumor. Very annoying. Now we're back up to 7 queens, and actually an 8th one being added on as well, so it's not the worst thing as far as creep replacement goes, but Maru is going to be insistent, trying to control this particular area. Finally, queens if he can. One does go down, despite the transfuse. And Maru does seem to be into the swing of things. 4th base on the way, 2nd factory as well. soO is pretty comfortable on 4 bases. 77 drones, actually just going to round it out to 80 plus, which is nice to see. His own 1-1 is finally done as well. And Maru did once again, delay his +2 armor just with the minerals available. Oh, the Widow Mines actually not going to be the ones taken care of. Try to go for the full surround, but oh, actually those ended up being pretty good connections. Okay, that was actually decent. I thought it was a missed opportunity from soO because those Widow Mines were so clumped up, it would have just been instantly all of them gone. He went for this around in the bio, didn't quite get it initially, but ended up getting the Banelings, connecting with the Marines. Most of that army does go down. Combine it with a little bit of a run by as well, and soO is finding little pricks and prods that is actually very annoying. 4 SCVs is really not a whole lot, but even this Widow Mine's about to do more friendly fire. Oh, almost did. But soO is trying his best to kind of tit for tat, right? He can defend and attack and harass and then still also be building up as far as the technology goes into the Hydras. Then he's going to be in a good position. And those Hydras are out. They have their range upgrades, so working on that speed. Enough queens once again to instantly replace any creep that is cleaned up. And the Hydras also now add that little aspect of being able to chase a little bit more, particularly against the medevacs. Another Ling run by is going to do nothing, actually. Good micro there from Maru, not to let the Widow Mine do friendly fire. Love that the medevacs are being rallied to the SCVs, which helps specifically against Ling run-bys, not so much Banelings. Decently big attack here, honestly, on the south side, but that is enough of a Zerg army. Full surround coming in as well. Good focus fire there initially, but kind of overstayed his welcome. Initially, absolutely 100% thought he could burst those Banelings down, but even if he had taken care of the rest of the Banelings, the Lings had a full surround with even upgrades, so they were chomping away, and the Hydras are going to be doing their consistent DPS that entire time, so Maru was forced to flee. Back to reinforcements, though. A good number of them. Baneling's not quite yet done. Thankfully finish at the last possible second. +2 attack is done for the Terran. Widow Mine friendly fire, and now off of creep. I mean, the Zerg player should be kind of careful. That was really far off of creep, and then Maru was also getting a little stimmed there. And Widow Mine friendly fire made all of his Marines, or the front line Marines anyway, one shot even to a Linger Hydra. Marauder slow on the way now as 2-2 is finished up. Should be seeing +3 start up very, very soon. Maru comfortable on 4 bases. soO now up to 5. Staying at 80 drones. I gotta get a couple of more. And the Hive has finally started as well. Good amount of creep spread too. I mean, soO has actually even managed to inch forward a little bit on the creep spread, not just replace it. So kudos to him, actually covering all avenues of attack rather well with that creep spread. Even Overlord creeping up on the bottom left. I love it. Good defense of this potential drop as soO also sets up his own little run by. Not just Lings, not just Banelings, not just Hydras, everything included. It will be tackling a planetary though, so it's going to need a little more than that, and there it comes. That's a decent amount of units, and Maru has no idea that that is on the way. Focusing on his drop to the right side and his main attack off to the left. He's got reinforcements at home, but they're not protecting the 4th base. And I believe that is enough to actually kill it. He's going to go after the SCVs, but might just go ahead and grab the planetary without the Banelings, and that's exactly what he does. Might lose these number of Hydras. They're not so great at escaping, but probably worth it. Yeah, as the Hydras even do end up trading. Distraction as well, so it looks like the drop was cleaned up in the natural, and the attack on the left has been forced to flee all the way back home, now unloading in the midst of a battle. That is not the best case scenario for a Terran player. Is this actually enough from the Zerg to find that breaking point, though? More Bailings roly-poling on in here. Not a whole lot of splash available. Just one more Widowmine with a pop-off. Might do more friendly fire, and that's exactly what it does. And 100%, that was the time to just throw everything you got as the Zerg player to the Terran. I actually really doubted that was going to be the moment, but soO just had enough on the front lines already, combined with the reinforcements, propelled off of that really good creep spread to find the weak point from Maru. So good job on soO for having still that killer instinct. I don't think it's anything that he's ever been known not to have. He's always been very good at that and has not lost it. So now, surprisingly enough, Maru is 1-1 with soO. We got ourselves game number 3 on Oceanborn. Bottom right, Maru. Top left, soO. This is our widest map yet. As far as the base count, maps are fairly similar, about 7.5, 8. It's like, I think it like averages on 8. Some have 7.5, some have 8.5. So it's not a huge difference. There's no map with like 4 bases, which would be insanely low. Like crazy low. And there's no map with like 16 bases for each player. So, but this is the one that's wide. So even though the base count might be kind of similar, we're talking about a usually easier time for a Zerg player in that mid to late game getting their 6th base, was it? Or maybe it was 7th base compared to hard lead. So usually we look at this situation and it actually kind of feels like the first 2 maps might have even favored a Terran player. They were the skinnier maps. They had the direct attack path from your 3rd to your opponent's 4th. And yet Maru did give up the 2nd map there. Now we move on to a larger map in general. And so you would think soO might have a good chance to actually knock Maru out of this first best of 3. Of course, GSL is double elim, basically, right? We don't call it that. We call it a GSL style group, and even other esports call it GSL style group, which is kind of cool, but it's double elim. Anyway, so Maru might actually be in some trouble, but then I actually don't think of soO even at his prime as the best late game player. Now, obviously, he did play pretty good first game. I did give him credit. I was surprised at how well he played that out and how close he got to knocking Maru off, actually. But he didn't. And, in general, I guess I have a lot more faith in Maru's dependability. But he has been weak in GSL before, just the last GSL that happened. So we'll see. Finally going into an actual forward 2 racks. Not 1 racks, not another rack's proxied somewhere, just a good old-fashioned forward 2 racks. Now, this would possibly lead into the follow-up 4 racks. I feel like that is the most important thing to really mention and remind people. I kind of mentioned it as a possibility in the first game, but less likely because that rack had floated back, so it wouldn't have had its add-on, it wouldn't have had its couple extra Marines, it would have been a weaker one, right? But with 2 barracks back at home, you have to worry about a 2-1-1, and you have to worry about a potential 4 racks follow-up as well as the Zerg player. So, obviously, if it's 1 racks, that's not really the issue, and if the racks is proxied, it'd be less fast, less strong. But just to throw that out there. And soO has not really been one to scout the forward position. Now, he knows what the build is based off the number of units that suddenly appear on his base, right? But for instance, if it was a 3 racks, he wouldn't have even scouted the 3rd racks in the high ground quite fast enough. He would have scouted the lack of command center, though. But the point is, he still would have been in trouble on his hatchery, which he's in trouble anyway, actually, on the hatchery, so never mind. As like the 3 racks that a Zerg doesn't know is on the way can almost guarantee to cancel that 3rd hatch. The 2 racks with only 3 Reapers doesn't often get that 3rd hatch canceled. It basically shouldn't nowadays. So that is a problem for soO. He obviously just has to handle it. He just has to deal with it. He just has to say, okay, don't let that trip me up too much. Definitely don't get supply blocked because of it. Don't forget everything and bank 400 minerals because of it. Just cancel, let it go, and rebuild. But again, Maru did not dedicate it much at all to get that. So a little concerning. soO also still has no idea what the follow-up is. This Overlord Scout in the back is hardly a tell. I don't think you can tell anything from the gas at this point. We saw in the last game, it was a 3cc build, right? And he got his gases pretty freaking late. After the 5 racks, after the double engineering bay. The Lings will finally be the actual scout. Although, they didn't see the second racks, but you know that it was a 2 racks opener based off the Reaper's timing. And it didn't see the starport timing either, which I don't think you would actually have to. Well, I mean, it's possible this was a 2-on-1 right off the 2 base, and then 2 medevacs are about to pop. Actually, no, I'd be kind of concerned for soO. Doesn't know about the 3rd CC, doesn't know about the starport timing, and that Overlord is not about to sacrifice itself by the looks of things. Now, it is the 3rd CC version, so, I mean, it's really going to be figured out, I think, once you see there's 2 Hellings and 2 Cyclones already. Can't be that fast into a 2-1-1, right? But gonna lose an Overlord that is gonna supply block him. And that is a hefty supply block, actually. No base about to finish, no Overlord about to finish. Whoops-a-daisy. This game just feels, it's not terrible for soO, but everything is not going his way. Everything. And what a hefty supply block that was. You figure he's just building as many Overlords as he had minerals is the way to do it. And that's, I guess, that is. So he is not going to have to worry about Overlords for a little while. Now going into the drones, but obviously the consequence of being supply blocked is that those drones are supposed to be mining for an extra 15 seconds. Already done. And then hopefully you're already moving into army, because Maru's first attack, his first real attack, is actually on the way. He's got 5 Hellbats, guys. The armory is done. Engineering bays were actually pushed off. This is kind of what I like to say Oliveira does a decent amount of times, but Maru's bringing it out. And even without the Hellbats, this looks like it might have been game over regardless. If these are just Hellions, I think that's it, because the Banelings are being jumped on, and soO is just woefully underprepared. Nothing about this game went his way, and that supply block absolutely killed him. If you don't get supply blocked, you don't have to wait for that. You are a little more on point about everything else in the game, because you're not frustrated with yourself. And then the Banelings are 5 seconds faster, and they actually finish. Are they enough to deal with this? Maybe not. But they would have been stronger, that's for sure. And this is just a very frustrated Zerg when you see them pulling the drones like that. Not the game 3 that soO was hoping for. At all. At all. He never got to the point that he wanted to. He was building his sandcastle, and Maru just came over and kicked it before he even had, the towers done, all right? This is really mean of Maru. But seriously, that was not the game that soO wanted to show for his 3rd game. After 2 games that were very close, obviously 1 game 2, and game 1 had at least 1 moment where the supply deficit was quite scary for Maru. But Maru does what we expect, and he does 2-1 soO, and so he'll move on to the winner's match, and soO will have to face the loser of the upcoming best of 3. All right, so we have our 2 other players in Group A. Bottom left, it is DRG. Top right, it is Shin, once known as Ragnarok. I do give him a pass on this name change after a decade. I usually don't give passes for this guy. I think it's a really dumb move. But I give a pass for this one because it is just his real name. And in Korea, you would literally just call him by his real name. So the Korean commentators are calling him by his real name. The graphics, the hype videos, and all that, they do still use the online handle. But then when you hear the commentary, they are saying Shin. So it's a weird, funny thing, I guess. They're just very esports. But apparently his mom or his grandma was confused by his name being Ragnarok or something. I mean, the actual reason still sounds kind of weird, but it's his real name. I'll give it a pass. Anywho, so we got a ZVZ. And again, the winner is going to face Maru. Loser faces soO. So lots of ZVZs here today. The DRG, he is the returnee. It's got to be like a nice word. Easy word to use for anyone who's come back from the military. I'm going to use returnee. He did go to the military. He has come back. He's never looked as strong as he did. Honestly, even when he went to the military for years prior to that, he wasn't as strong as he once was. This guy was once a GSL champion. Also, I think an MLG champion and maybe something else that I forgot. But he was very, very good. World's best Zerg for a little while there. But his return to StarCraft 2 has not been explosive. There's a couple of names that pop out when you think of really good returns in the military, and number one is probably Hero. Yeah, probably. DRG, not the worst, not the best. I mean, worst might have been Tasia, just because Tasia was like, are you back? Are you not back? Are you back? Why did you do well at Home Story Cup? Are you back? Okay, you left. But does seem like his heart has not really been in it, but I can't fully say that as I do not know him. It just is gameplay is sometimes uninspired. Every once in a while, though, he does seem to be back to his old ways, in which he does look as fearful, as intimidating as his old self. But I would say amongst these two, it is Ragnarok, Shin now, who's going to be the more intimidating. And actually, in this game, to start things off nice and fast, it is going to be a 2-base Ling all-in. Classic ladder move right here. Classic. Now, DRG, the only way he's actually going to be able to tell this is happening is if these Lings get to the Lings that are being built up. Now, the third hatch is starting to become a little more questionable, but then this evolution chamber is kind of making a sign like, okay, I could be doing something on 2 bases that's not an all-in, right? Or you could have faked sending the base drone out and been like, oh no, Lings are there, I can't do that yet. It'd be a fake, right? But yeah, so DRG, he's not quite prepared for this, but he is getting a Baneling Nest that's a rather safe timing. To really be safe against a 2-base Ling all-in, though, it'd have to be on 2 bases. This was after his third hatch was thrown down. So now, you basically just have to panic mode, right? He already has a decent number of Lings. It does feel like he was going to do his own form of aggression off of 3 bases, but obviously, Shin did beat him to the punch. And unfortunately, although that looked to be an okay fight for DRG, I actually don't blame him for taking that. That was not good at all. That was overwhelmingly in Shin's favor. And now his queens are dead, it's going to impact further Ling production. I guess his Lings just... I mean, I guess the queens are actually less helpful than they seemed. Because I really don't blame DRG for standing right there, because if he knew for a fact that he did not have enough firepower to take on Shin's Lings right there, he would have backed up. He would have tried to probably buy more time, or at least immediately pull the drones. But I think he thought he had enough, and he did not. And as I'm saying, the injects are now going to be a problem. DRG having to cancel his third hatch to afford the Lings, afford a queen to be produced once more. And Shin, well, slowly to do more damage. It's not quite over yet. Don't count your chickens before they hatch and all that, so I don't know. Banelings are obviously going to be a huge help now that the Baneling Nest is done. This queen is holding her own, trying to buy that time, getting down to the red, getting out of her last health. He is going to go down, but the one Baneling on the high ground should be completed. This one not yet, but this one, yes! 2 Lings left over for Shin right there, who is at an even worker count at this point, but is lacking some technology. He does have 2 queens versus 1, so injects are still a bit of a problem for DRG. And it now comes down to who balances the Ling versus drone production a little bit better. Shin going into the drone production first and foremost is now up by 6. DRG a little bit later to that. And the problem is that if he ever thinks, well, I might be later to the drones, let me just go attack with my Lings and Banelings, he might not ever actually have enough to defeat Defender's advantage. Because the Banelings are going to take forever to get over to the other side of the map, or to produce on the other side of the map. Let's kind of disregard them temporarily. It's be Lings versus Lings. And as soon as Shin sees a potential counterattack on the way, well, he can also produce Lings. And like I said, it comes down to a can you beat Defender's advantage? Kind of not. And a wall is also going to obviously help quite a bit as well. So in this case, even, you don't even have to produce your own Lings, which is exactly what Shin is doing. He's not producing a ton of Lings, he's producing some, and then he's producing more drones. So he's staying ahead of DRG, who is also picked up on what this ZDZ is actually turning into and is now trying to drone himself. Third hatches might eventually come down, but we do have a couple of options really for both players off of this 2 base. Now, I think more so for DRG, it is going to be 2 base. Okay, no, I was going to say into 3 base Ling Baneling, but the Roach one does come down. It's going to come down for both players. They might just go ahead and try and get into a Roach game, but kind of mirroring each other right now. There's the third hatch coming down from DRG. Immediately pressured. Not by a lot of units. I would say, oh, usually not enough to actually cancel it, but that was a pretty nasty hit there. DRG now lacking the Lings, but so is Shin, honestly. You know, only Banelings does not usually end the game. And Shin does not have a lot of production on the way either, so it looks even a little bit awkward. His Banelings clearly don't want to explode on the building. If they knew they would guarantee kill it, they might have, but yeah, I do believe there's too much health for sure. For sure at this point. Maybe at 100 health it would have been enough. Anyway. Nice trade there for DRG. 2 for 4 is always a good trade. But the wall is still up here. Third hatch is rather new, so if you surrounded that, you probably would get a cancel. But DRG is actually forcing the issue into the natural. Well, he might be right about that. Oh, geez Louise, that Evolution Chamber came down in the nick of time. And I think it only came down at the nick of time because a Ling distracted DRG's Lings. I feel like they actually could have forced their way through. Well, now they get on top of the hatchery, but it feels like it might be a little too late, or maybe it's still going to be okay. All right, yeah, Roach is not fast enough to actually stop that from being canceled, so Shin is going to now be very far behind on the third hatch, but he could just continue making Roaches an attack. This is something that DRG has not yet done. Oh, no, he's already done it. Oh, Jesus. Okay, I missed that. Okay, well, he's already done it, so never mind about that. All right, this is actually really weird for Shin. He does have more drones, but he's so far behind on the third hatch. DRG is going for an all-in. Ling, Roach, Ravager is going to be on the way here, guys. Shin will have +1 missile by the looks of things, or maybe while the fight is happening. But I don't think he knows exactly what is on the way. He did recently get a scout on the third hatch, and he might have seen the lack of drones, because he is building Roaches at this point. I think it's exactly what has happened, and it's very good that Shin is building Roaches. Actually, I think that this is already too late for DRG. Defender's advantage helping out here. The +1, a timer that DRG knows is on the way. That third hatch can be sacrificed for the greater good, which is exactly what is being done. I do like the attempt to cancel this +1, but the +1 is now 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. It's gonna finish. It's gonna finish. If he had focus fired a little bit earlier, perhaps he could have gotten the cancel, but now all of these Roaches from Shin have +1. Gonna help so much against the Lings that are naturally reinforcing this. Roach speed might also finish. Nope, not. It's not. Corrosive Bile. Corrosive Bile pretty good. But nonetheless, Defender's advantage still working out for Shin here. He still has more drones. DRG not giving up on the attack. He's going to hope that these Lings, despite them no longer being very good body blockers, are going to still be able to get that surround. It's exactly what they're going to try and do. They are being shot down very, very quickly. The Roaches avoid being completely surrounded, avoid the worst part of the Corrosive Bile, now jumping on top of the very weak, fragile Ravagers, and this is going to be a defense from our blue Zerg. That third hatch is still maybe a question mark, but nope, actually DRG going to tap out, figuring that he's too far behind in the drones, and he's too far behind in the upgrades to actually play this game out. And maybe he's right about that, but Shin was going to have a problem actually producing the maximum amount of resources. You can see here he was actually banking 1,000 minerals, which doesn't feel good when you're defending it all in, but he was fine. But still, if you can't use that, maybe DRG could have pumped out some drones, could have started up +1, and could have tried to play out this game, but decided not to. The all-in didn't work, and he taps out. Shin wins game number 1. So now in the top left of Golden Aura, we do have Shin, who is up 1. On the bottom right, we do have DRG. That +1 was going to be a significant problem, but... And the bank also might have been a problem because, you know, it is roach-based. When the larva pops, you can use a decent amount of that mineral bank on roaches. But he didn't have roach speed. So a counterattack would have actually been quite difficult to achieve. A counterattack would probably have to be an all-in from Shin as well, because any amount of Lings from DRG could have circumvented the Roaches, continued canceling the third hatch. But I guess they wouldn't have been very useful against the Roaches at the end of the day. But then could have DRG mustered enough Roaches to defend, even without his own +1? Maybe. I do feel like that is absolutely a game that if it's Championship Game 7, you do not leave. But... only because you're, you know, taking your hands off the keyboard and rubbing your temples and being really frustrated, perhaps. But still. Well, DRG, like I said, wanted to do the all-in. If it doesn't work, taps out. Spear Dragon with an even more OG resub. Thank you for the 110 months. Good lord. Hot damn. Shin has gone for a earlier hatch, slightly earlier pool. A little more of that new-fashioned opener. The last game was definitely a good fight from both parties. Until the end, in which, you know, the die-hard, you know, stay-in-game type people might say, okay, DRG left a little too early. Other than that, it was a very close game. And both players were really trying to get the maximum amount from their respective places, either the defender or the attacker, because it did switch multiple times. I can only hope that something will happen here again. I mean, that started off with what you would typically call an all-in, doing the thing. That is, doing just enough damage. It is no longer an all-in. Which obviously kind of pollutes, distorts the phrase all-in from its poker counterpart, but that's fine, because it's a different game. But did just enough. But then, especially when it comes to ZVZ, the ebb and flow, the drone versus army dynamic matters more. And Shin was winning that, but yeah, the other dynamics that can obviously influence a game like that, third hatch, larva in particular, went against DRG, then was in his favor. Roach speed and the way that roaches can kind of all in, but then sometimes can be out navigated without that roach speed. I mean, it's an interesting matchup. You do not get to see it all that often anymore, too, so that's why it's an even more interesting matchup. But I guess when you all-in doesn't work, you just tap out. Evolution Shipper coming down is a for real one. This is not a 2-base all-in. It is going to be a lot of Lings, though, but this is, I think, Lings to skip the Baneling Nest and then go into like 2-base Roaches, which could still go into an all-in, I suppose, but... well, that's gonna see all the Lings popping. That could not be more perfectly timed. 2 Lings, even maybe gonna get a drone. Actually, they split their DPS, so they will not get a drone. But that is not an all-in amount of Lings. This is not a 2-base all-in, as it was in the last game. DRG is still in a weird spot, though, in a very weird spot, actually. Oh, no. Oh, my God. Oh, my God, he didn't wall. What the hell? Whoa, he didn't wall, and he was supply blocked, so he didn't have any army coming out. And this is gonna win the game. Huh. Well. Alright then. I suppose that does happen. But talk about a series of unfortunate events. I thought DRG not bringing his queens away from the Overlord kill was missing an opportunity to kill the 2 Lings, you know, deny them the scout. But apparently that was very much worth it. Because that Overlord snipe is the direct cause for DRG not having any amount of Lings. Any amount to help his queens and help his drone pool. But even worse than that, he had a second queen that was heading back to the main to inject, even though he knew he had no Lings on the way. I actually think that was a problem. Obviously, the timing was a problem. Nothing you could really do about that, I suppose. It just sucks. Your Overlord was too close to their main. He did make a mistake. But then I think it was a maybe read on what I was talking about, which is like, oh, it's not that dedicated. It's not that many Lings. It's not the earliest amounts. He's clearly trying to go into something beyond the Lings. And so DRG also didn't take it that seriously. Because he could have walled with his 2 queens. But he brought the one into the main to inject. Either that or a bit of a mechanics issue. Where he has a setup in which is, you know, he just defaulted to injecting. And so the queen, you didn't even really notice that the queen was going to the main base. That is, I suppose, possible as well. Anyway, this game's over. Like, I'm actually surprised that DRG stays in this game. You know, this is definitely over. If he had lost 6 drones, it still would have been really, really awkward because it was almost for free. I know he did made Lings to do it, but still. It would still be a travesty. Because he could have avoided 6 drones going down, but he lost 19. Even if he had lost 10, I'd be more understanding. But 19 is that's a lot to ask to make up for. And Shin did not make any mistakes. I mean, Shin, you know, basically was like, oh shit, I'm doing a lot of damage, it's great. And then just went into drones. Just went into drones. Only to the 45 drone mark, and then he built nothing but army, which Shin does see coming, and so that's why he finally taps out. But yeah, what a weird game too. I feel like there was absolutely no reason for him to have lost that many drones, but it is what it is. It happens, I guess. GG's. Shin versus Maru coming up. So now we got the winners match. In the bottom left, it is Maru. In the top right of Alcyone, it is Shin or Alcyone, or however. There was a Reddit thread over the week where it was some guy complaining that Revelated needs to stop. And I'm glad to see that there was the usual amount of pushback, I would say. Because I do think that it deserves pushback. Language is ever evolving. You know? So, there's got to be some pushback. And even though I'm also kind of annoyed by some of the things that evolve, such as irregardless, after really trying hard to correct myself for years, because I used to say that simply in error, I have to get over it. Language evolves. Whatever. Or the fact that so many people, probably that guy included, use the word casted. Cast is the past tense when you're talking about a broadcast. But yeah, usual pushback from that, you know, language evolves. But then I also liked people pointing out that revelated does mean something different than revealed. Anyway, I forgot what I brought this up, actually. Oh, someone in the thread was like, what do you expect from the casters? They can't even pronounce Greek words correctly. And I just thought that was the craziest benchmark I've ever heard for a person. We can't pronounce Greek words correctly, in which some of us have actually looked up how to say these words. And there's actually just no consensus. If you look up how to pronounce this word, there's like 5 different YouTube videos. Hecate has one Google pronunciation, which is what I go off of, but Alcyone doesn't. So I just thought that was the stupidest what's the word? Goalpost to give us. What do you expect? They can't even say a Greek word that apparently no one has like a true pronunciation for. Where? I do kind of agree with them, although I've never really noticed that Colossus and Colossi are used incorrectly. Because I don't do it. I have a habit of assuming that when people talk about casters, they're talking about me directly, which is almost like narcissistic, but still. But yeah, I never really think about it, but I do know that some of my co-casters absolutely use Colossi for a singular Colossus. But I guess I just don't care. Because I don't have a stick up my butt. Like some of these Redditors. Lazy caster's not time traveling back to ancient Greece to ask them how it's said. I know! Because it's not just it's not like a modern Greek word. It's a, what is it? It's like some, I think it's a name of a planet or a star or something, but it was also discovered a very long time ago. We're gonna look this up because we have a totally normal ZVT on the way, guys, which is what I predicted. Although there's also a chance that Shin would all in. His all in probably wouldn't come till 3 bases anyway. Yeah, it's a star. I don't know when it was discovered. Oh, Alcyone is a goddess of the sea, so obviously she was made a very long time ago. Yeah, exactly. How dare we not time travel? Anyway. That aside, my grievance against StarCraft Reddit aside, we do have a pretty normal TVZ. Maru actually went for a high ground 1 racks into 3CC. 111 is set up now with a Viking actually on the way, and then possibly into Liberator after that, most likely into Liberator after that. Although, no, I actually think he's doing something that's very old school. I think he's going to go Viking Banshee. Maybe Viking Raven? I don't know. More on that later, as we do have an attempted run by. Saw that there were slow lings and I guess wanted to gun it, but didn't seem to really work out. Now only 1 ling died. The Reaper will get far more than 2 Hellions. He is going to do the old school thing. This is the build that I used to do all the time, which is why it's so in my mind. But the Viking into Banshee is kind of fallen off as the go-to build. as it does obviously delay the Banshees. So basically it was like, well, why do the Viking and then delay the Banshees significantly, and then also have 3 units from the starport and an upgrade, delaying everything else, your barracks, or in this case, factories that are coming down. So that's kind of why we moved away from it. But the Viking obviously clears up Overlords. That's always a benefit of getting a Viking, no matter what you follow up with. And then the Banshees now both appear with Cloak timed, so that you don't have to worry about making them run across the map and go, oh no, Cloak isn't done, and then they run back, which is what I do all the time. I don't think that's actually the reason that pro gamers do it, but it is something that's kind of nice, actually. This first Banshee will appear on the other side of the map with Cloak. So that is kind of nice. It obviously would have appeared faster if it was just into Banshees, no Viking. But yeah, more on this factories that I noted here, I emphasized, and it is going to be scouted. Very nice scout there from Shin, who also sees still an upgrading tech lab. And that was actually a fake. But either it's a fake that he thinks Shin can figure that would have been the timing for Hyperflight rotors, or he's faking the timing of the Cloak. And I think it is the latter. Because I just can't imagine that you would be so on top of a Viking into Banshee Cloak build that you would know the exact second of which Hyperflight rotors would have to start. I can't imagine it, but then I'm bad at the game, so. Anyway, it would have been kind of cute if it was the reason that, like, this Cloaked Banshee surprised a queen that thought she didn't need the Spore Crawler to come with her. But Shin actually taking this about as calmly as possible, waits for the Spore Crawler and 3 queens as well to help out. Oh, really nice round. There's just so many Hellions. Good lord. That's just too many Hellions. And the queens got lazy. The queens were like, good job, guys. And they just watched from afar. Not that would have changed the dynamic super whole ton a lot, but it would have added a few more Hellion kills. You can see a lot of them were injured. That was a lot of lings at the end of the day to trade out for those Hellions, but probably okay. That was 7 Hellions, because 2 died earlier on. That was 7 Hellions for 36 lings. Not the worst, I would say. Just kind of sucks. When you get us around to Hellions, you're really hoping that's done. You know, it's done and dusted. 2 Banshees still flying around, actually finding the drone damage, and still finding someone without an Overseer. Lair finished up recently, and now the Overseer is on the way, but the Banshees get a couple of more drones. Actually, 4 more drones, and will live with plenty of health at that. Obviously, knowing that the Overseer's out, they won't try and boogie with the queens. Now, those are only Cyclones. There actually were no Hellions on the way from this production round. But I guess they were in such nice position that the Lings really could not get a good enough surround. But honestly, Lings versus only Cyclones, I do worry for the Cyclones. But nothing gonna happen over there. Shin's run-by attempt does nothing. He simply takes the drone damage, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. He knows he's facing mech. Remember, he got that really nicely timed Ling Scout. No confusion over it being bio or anything like that. Definitely mech. 4th base already down and turning into a planetary for Maru. Kind of feels bad. This is a very seamless mech opener. And you really want the mech opener to have something go wrong with it, as obviously we know the mech game to be kind of its weakest at the early to mid game. That's a, very simplified version of things, but yeah. It's the late game 5 base Terran who's siege hopping tanks and liberators and Vikings and whatnot that sounds the scariest. Maru is actually first and foremost going to the Cyclone game, right? So he has this 4 base setup going into 5 with a very mobile army that can actually also escape, so it feels confident being on the front of the map. It isn't just a very passive play, although the Cyclones are only making their appearance now. But it is going into, I guess, a more typical mech structure, which is tank-based. You got the Cyclone upgrade on the way now, so obviously the Cyclones are going to be sacrificed anytime soon. They will try and help out as much as they can. Barrack scouting over here. Eventually the minerals will be mined out, take a 5th base. I don't know, it feels like a very, as I said, seamless mech build, and you really want something to go wrong. You, at the very least, want them to have a much slower addition of expansions. Not necessarily because you stopped them, you committed to an attack that stopped them, but just because they should be scared of X, Y, or Z. That didn't really ever happen in this game. Maru was as quick to his expansions as Shin was, And even handles a rather large Ling run by surprisingly well. I had 3 SCVs? I thought there was going to be at least 7. But all right. So still very healthy on 4 bases. 5th base moving over to that bottom right like I was talking about. A couple Lings will distract it, but Maru also is ready to move out. He's got his Banshees, his Raven, his Vikings, Hellions, Cyclones, and his tanks. And when 1 is done, this guy's got everything. Shin does have technology to deal with this, and by technology I do mean Vipers, but his setup is not one which a Zerg player would be envious of usually. He's not engaging with this in the middle of the map. It's actually getting disturbingly close to his reinforcement line. And then now it's just about to be close to his chokes. So if he tries to run down even both chokes at the same time, that's still unideal compared to a concave. No gold base for you either. And Maru just cut the map in half while taking 5 bases of his own to now a 5-base Zerg player, as the gold base was not going to happen. Not going to happen anytime soon. Shin in a lot of trouble, unless he can have one hell of an engagement. He is also getting to a greater Spire. Broodlords could still be a problem here. Cyclones can only do so much against them. Handful of Vikings can only do so much as well. But the Greater Spire is only now finishing. You still need the supply, you still need the Corruptor, you still need to have so much. Vipers do come in with a couple of blinding clouds, but there is a depth to this mech army. And there's also so much of the mech army that can actually just escape the blinding cloud. It's still so Cyclone-based. And that was not the trigger pull that Shin was hoping for. He does try and come back and remax and get the Vipers back up, and he's looking for that little bit of just, you know, shoveling away here at the mech army, but I'm not sure it's actually working. Maru so confidently coming up here, engaging with the leftovers of the Zerg army. Now, a lot of tanks are anchoring this, and actually some of the friendly fire is starting to hurt his Cyclone numbers, and so he's not going to be able to break up this high ground. But that is still a very big loss of Zerg units as well, and Maru still has the middle of the map controlled, especially with the help of these Banshees, which are just out of range of the Overseer that never got Overlord speed. A couple of Vikings even survived to help out once again with the Vipers. I think one already died, actually. I thought he was building 3. I only see 2 on the unit tab. Hatchery still not going to happen. I'm actually surprised that Shin tries to take it again, when this one at least would be totally free. He could actually mine from this one. Might be a little bit of a horse blinder situation. And Shin is obviously under a lot of pressure, and he's not able to dislodge the mech army entirely, and that is really the worst case scenario. We have Broodlords on the way, but guess what? We also have Ghosts on the way. We do have 5 barracks, all with tech labs, all there to make Ghosts. Thors would also be very good to have in this situation, but would be slower and probably overall less efficient than a Ghost. I mean, Ghosts are pretty good, so I'll admit to that. But Thors are also pretty good, especially if there's no Parasite. Either way, he has a response to the Broodlords, but not quite on the front lines. Might have mistimed this a little bit. Doesn't know about the Greater Spire at all, but you always gotta, you know, figure it's on the way if you see a Spire is producing, which he did. So he probably knew this was clock. But it looks like his Ghost will not be on the front lines fast enough. His Vikings, however, are. 4 Vikings still alive. We got some Abducts coming in here, and that actually is going to take out most of the Vikings, but the Hellbats are on the front lines as well, and actually the Broodlords just cannot cut through everything. Oh, friendly fire! Oh, friendly fire! Oh my god. Good focus fire, actually, from Shin right there. I gotta highlight that. Good focus fire on the Ghosts. The Broodlings weren't gonna kill the Ghosts all that quickly, especially because they aren't upgraded, but they did just contribute to the tank's focus, friendly firing. There we go, friendly firing on the Ghosts. Not that 2 Ghosts would have been enough to kill all the Broodlords, but still. Taking them out of the equation, now we're still back only to 2 Ghosts. Broodlords are trying to make something happen here. And if that only thing that happens from the Broodlords is that the mech army has to retreat entirely, that's still something. But it is just retreating at this point, and it's retreating back to now a 6th base for Maru on the gold. More Ghosts, and now finally Thors, which, even if they do get friendly fire, they obviously have a bit more health than a Ghost. So I think this is going to be the good enough mech army. Not that we're on Broodlords anymore, though. Shin is trying to remax on a ground-based army. It's also one of the armies that he can afford to remax on, to be fair. But it might also be one that overwhelms Maru if Maru thinks that this army's not going to be that big. I'm afraid, however, if Shin is thinking, and I can guarantee he's not, he's played plenty late-game TVs against mech players. If Shin was thinking, oh, he's going into Thors, now I'm going to go into ground army, and he's going to really be shocked. That's just not a thing. If you're doing that as a Zerg player in your ladder game, it's not a thing. Thors with 3/3 upgrades are so freaking good that even if you end up going into a big surround of Roach, Hydra, Viper on top of the Thors, only if you get perfect blinding clouds will you actually take a decent fight. So, yeah. And it's not like all the tanks died either, so coming in through one direction here, not going to be very good. Thor's in single target mode as well. Take down one of the Vipers before they even get to do whatever they were planning on doing. I guess they were looking for a blinding cloud. Didn't happen. And now Neural Parasite is on the way, but I don't see any Infestors. And Neural Parasite is an excellent response to the late game mech army. Thors are very vulnerable to that, but you still have to have a very ideal scenario for it. And I just don't see that happening, especially as you still don't have any actual Infestors on the field. Ghosts are also out. They were the first thing out, so EMPs are possible. And Maru is back on the siege hop, this time even a little bit more mobile, because so much of his army is, again, things that don't have to siege. They are now in Thors. He has taken another base to the bottom right. He has so many extra command centers. They got some abducts pulling the Thors into the range of the Zerg army, and hopefully outside of the range of the tanks, but that didn't even actually happen. Tanks are still firing away, and Thors are so freaking chonky with 3/3 that they were able to slap back a little before they died. And this just feels inevitable, honestly. I feel like we've been watching Shin in a very unideal Zerg versus mech setup for the entirety of the game. And only if Maru was worse with mech would Shin have been able to come back. And by worse with mech, I mean making some very common mistakes. Totally not anticipating the Broodlords, not tech advancing into Ghosts, into Thors, into upgrades, being too courageous with his army, and not having a depth of tanks, underestimating Vipers, like that type of stuff. And he really hasn't done that. This is possibly his first bad advancement, but I can't even say it's bad. The Ghost will survive thanks to the X. You know, his tank line did actually get officially broken right there. It didn't retreat like the last time. He didn't stay in the middle of the map like the time before that. So that was maybe the worst advancement from Maru so far, and it wasn't even that bad. Ghost still alive, getting some snipes. Clearly not a great situation for a reserve player to be totally reliant on Roach Ravager. Now, this did push Maru back. Maru, however, still staying at a very strong 180 supply. I mean, can only has to worry about whatever Shin's remaxing with so much. He does want to know. He wants to see the Infestors. He wants to see the potential Broodlords. He wants to see potential Ultras, you know, whatever it is. But chances are, with the way this game has gone, and we know for a fact that this is the case, Shin's probably pretty broke. You never really want to say that as the Terran in the game, though, because that's when they actually have 5,000, 5,000. And here come the Infestors showing themselves as they are misrallied, which now will put Maru on high alert to the Infestors' Neural Parasite, which actually is no longer the ideal situation anyway. Neural Parasiting a couple of tanks here, not really what you want. A Fungal is definitely not what you want. Probably was meaning to get the Ghost, but missed both times. And that is it, yeah. Like I said, I feel like we were watching 18 minutes of a less than optimally played Zerg against a very optimal mech player. And assuming that everything went according to plan, you could kind of look into the future and see this exact outcome. Hopefully Shin gets a little more done in the next game, because Maru was really allowed to do everything he wanted and then some. So now we go on to Solaris, bottom left Shin, top right Maru. I used the beginnings of that last game to complain about Reddit, but now I'll use the beginnings of the second game to briefly go over the player's history here. I can bring up the exact stats, but I can also just go ahead and tell you Shin is screwed. Shin is something like, I don't know, like 10% chance of winning versus Maru in any circumstance whatsoever. It's crazy. And if you need reminding, Shin was Ragnarok at one point, and Ragnarok has been beaten to a bloody pulp by Maru multiple times. There was a very, very poor semifinal last year at Katowice, in which Shin had a great run, but then got 3-0 bopped by Maru. There is a GSL finals in which Shin had a great run, but then got like 4-1 or 4-0 bopped by Maru. It has not been a pretty picture as far as their history goes. And League of Leg is actually down right now, so that's quite unfortunate, but I'm pretty sure the win rate is something like 15%. It's crazy bad. I don't know how to fix my light, so... You'll just be blinded. Oh, there it is. My cat knocked it over. So, yeah. The fact that Shin... I guess, played out that last game without having his head cut off immediately is maybe an improvement, but really, I think that's just the consequence of that type of play style. A mech player hardly ever gets the chance to actually kill their opponent very quickly, right? Sometimes it can happen when it's a surprise, like, hey, I actually have 20 Cyclones and you thought I was doing a 2-1-1. Well, okay, yeah, this player is pretty doomed. And sometimes it does happen as soon as they max out and do their push. You know, it's very simple. But most of the time, mech is not going to be the thing that kills the person fast. So I'd love to give Shin some credit, but as someone finally did get access to a Lilac, they actually won in 27 in matches. Ragnarok's won once. It was a best of 1. So that hardly counts. So yeah. It's actually one of the worst matchups as far as professionals go. You know, we have our jokes and stuff about how, like, you know, no one beats X person 25 times in a row. But even then, usually it's more about a series, and they get more, like, individual wins, I guess. But, yeah, it's very, very tough for Shin versus Maru. We got 2 Rex from Maru, if you didn't look at the screen, and it is a simple 3 Reaper opener. Nothing surprising so far. Shin has gone into a 3 base setup for a Zerg player. What else is new? And the 3 CC actually from Maru, pretty freaking fast. So the Reapers have actually done an okay amount of damage. Pushed off the Queen, so some grenades. Might still be in trouble though. That 1 Reaper on the front, yeah, is gonna go down. But it killed 2 drones, so 3 drones actually. So far worth it. They can get a 4th, absolutely worth the consequence of 1 Reaper. And that 2nd Reaper is not going to go down, so I would say a very good opener for Maru here. Should be happy with the way this worked out. Is moving on to some factory production, but will he be moving on to more factories is now the question. Yes, he has 2 barracks, so that might mean it's a little less logical to go into factories at this point, but we know what happens. In fact, it's quite a nice trick. I would actually say he doesn't go mech again, though. It does absolutely feel like a... Oh, okay, well, I was wrong. My bad. Had a reactor, then went for tech lab, then went for factory. It is going to be 2 factories. I was going to say it just is something that we see all the Terrans do once in a blue moon. And some Terrans don't do it at all, obviously. Like, Clem never does it. Yun almost never does it. Maru, maybe more likely alongside, like, Gumiho, I suppose. But it's usually once in a best of 3, if that. Maybe once or twice in best of 5, if that. So that's what I was going off of, but Maru proved me wrong. Getting that 2nd factory in a really lovely tucked-in position, too. Not that Shin's Overlords are all that close to scouting anything currently, although this one is about to sack itself for the main. And if it takes a hard right, or soft right, if it kind of just takes like a curved right, I actually would see it. This actually might not be as clever as Maru was hoping for. Or the Overlord won't dare to sacrifice itself for the greater good. Oh, you bastard. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure it would have seen it. That Marine would not have killed it fast enough, even with the Liberator helping, because Liberator's anti-air sucks. But alright, we got ourselves another mech game. Cyclones are coming out here. Stim is on the way, but that could just be a convincing front line. He might not need the 100 gas that he's missing from that. Well, he's supply blocked, actually, so... Ah! Maru, excuse you. Yeah, so he was just letting it go as long as possible. Nolings actually scouted it, to be fair. But... so far, there's really nothing telling Shin that it is mech, and the default assumption should basically always be bio. That is a default assumption, and you scout for the alternative. A bunch of Cyclones about to run out of this natural, though, and... yes, they will be seen by this Overlord, but... actually, if they head over to the 3rd, they won't even be seen at all. Ah, it's kind of concerning. Shin could be in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. Yeah. He doesn't know there's no other Overlord over this pillar, I suppose, but if he goes to the top and then down, this Overlord will not see the Cyclones. Oh, yeah. That could be bad news. That could be very bad news. Liberator actually scouts the placement of the Overlord, so he can now very intentionally avoid that. And Shin, well, now he's supply blocks, but once he's on supply blocked, he's still building Lings and drones. No roaches. Now, roaches aren't strictly necessary, I guess. You could probably handle this with Ling Baneling, but only if you get a surround and the Banelings actually connect. Shin is building a lot of Lings right now. He seems to have picked up on something, or maybe just the timing, actually. We are approaching 7 minutes, and something should be happening from the Terran player. Banelings are being formed, and that might just be what saves his life here. He might not have been expecting Hellion Cyclone, but nonetheless, he has some defenses against it. Baneling so far not really getting any connections, and well, okay. I thought there might have been something happening on the right side that favored Maru, but absolutely not. Ling's distracting 2 Cyclones. Now, potentially wrap around to the third, not so much. I think the most important thing is that Shin didn't get overwhelmed, though, right? Like, that might not have been pretty as far as the first defense goes, but the most important thing is that Shin did not get overwhelmed. Now he knows that it is mech, but what an awkward start for Shin, who also had a lot less drones than you would hope for, as he did prepare for whatever was being thrown his way, only now getting to a drone count that matches Maru's and is better than Maru's, so not ideal for Zerg. At the very least, Shin's base count's pretty good. Whoops-a-daisy. 5 bases set up, ready to accommodate the drones now being produced. Roachmorn moving over to +1 missile and +2 carapace, because again, he was deceived. Very much deceived, so I think he was bio. Oh, nice run by here. Very nice run by. There's no high ground wall. Splits it half to the natural, half to the main, and SCVs are gonna go down. Not too many, though. Maybe not overall worth the sacrifice of Lings there, but also pulled the army back. 15 more drones also being produced while that was happening, so much healthier drone count at this point in time, but Maru is pretty much right behind him, already moving over to a 4th base as soon as he really can, as soon as he wants to. So that's a fairly strong Terran economy. And it does feel actually a little bit better for Shin in this game than last game, believe it or not. I know that Shin had the Bamboozled, but because he didn't take extreme damage from it, I'm not too concerned. He did sacrifice drone production for a long time, but still. And I think that there's at least a little more that Maru is trying to do to be a little sneaky. It didn't really give me the most seamless Terran feel, but it is still pretty freaking seamless. The 4th base comes down with absolutely no opposition. It's a good feeling for a mech player. Once again, a fairly similar pacing to this game. As Maru prioritizes the Cyclones, then adds on the tanks. Might try and take more of that center position as well. The map is very different, though. The last map actually had a very strong split potential, because the right side of the map isn't really used so much because of the mineral wall. It kind of condenses the map, makes it skinnier, and the left side also is not as used as Solaris here, where you can see that Shin is actually using the top left side of the map. So you actually get a position in the last map in which it is pretty direct, and Maru used that to then siege hop forward and take control of the middle, which also has its Elnaga. It just, like, it screams to do that, right? Solaris is definitely different. You clearly have a way to enter into the middle of the map, but this middle of the map has a lot more avenues that can be surrounded on. You can kind of, as a Zerg player, not sacrifice this position, of course, but you have so many other bases that are not going to be stopped by Maru's push. Like last game again, Shin kept trying to get the gold and was denied completely. So I think that's going to really be the biggest difference, actually. Regardless of the way things have happened in this game so far, I think the map is actually the biggest difference. There's not as clear-cut of a way for the mech player to siege hop forward that doesn't open up opportunities for run-bys or for big surrounds, multi-pronged engagements. But I do think that Maru is looking at the potential push down to this south side, so this is not a base possible for Shin, but he takes this base instead. And then eventually he will have to worry about tanks siege up maybe to the far south, or maybe just here. Either way, it's going to be awfully close to his base, for sure. The run-bys can happen to the north side, to the orbital, to what could be a less defended third base as well. Lings will take care of a couple of tanks, no problem. And actually, he's going to find a bit of a vulnerable spot here from Maru, who maybe spread himself a little too thin. Cyclones reacting to the north harassment were a bit late to defend the tanks that were scattered around this ledge. And the Vipers are being controlled very, very well, having not been killed as of yet, getting a couple more abducts on the Cyclones, and that was a very good opportunity for Shin. I'm sad I missed the beginning. But Maru had placed its tanks in kind of a conga line, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and that concave potential, especially with the Vipers doing what they did, was huge. And Maru is going to have to regroup, which he will be able to do. Very easily going to be able to remax on what is now 5, actually 6 bases. This bottom right one is done. It was built on location, apparently. But it's still a better game by far for Shin. There's just so many more opportunities for something like that. Because let's say that Maru doesn't, you know, rally like he is currently doing. He, like, gets a better rally that's a little less vulnerable to this huge concave. He'd be mainly pushing down to the south. Again, at least 2-pronged engagements. And once again, kind of caught around this ledge. It does seem to be the difficult part of this map for Terran players, both mech and bio alike. The planetary is going to go down. Thor's being destroyed. And Maru actually is dangerously close to just straight up dying. I think he actually is going to straight up die. This was by far, like, the easiest game of Shin's life against Maru, I'm pretty sure. I've never seen him so easily take care of Maru. And it all comes down to this freaking base. This base requires a lot more thinking, I guess. Like, not to say that Maru's dumb or anything, but like it does require a lot more to defend than you might naturally think. Especially if you get it up so easily and you get the other bases up so easily and you're like, oh, no. But it really is a difficult spot. You know, its high ground doesn't actually support the planetary when it's being under attack. The tank that's up here, plus it gets abducted anyway. And you have the reinforcements coming along a very awkward path. Yeah, it's just I mean, this is definitely a good situation for Shin. And it really is getting very close to being game over, and I think it is, actually. Even if Maru stabilizes, I think he's so far behind. Nice snipe on that Ghost. But it all happened in the span of 60 seconds. And I really 100% blame this base. Had he, as I said, not rallied down here, but rallied over here and then just defended the high ground here, like, he doesn't lose nearly as much army. He might sacrifice the base and the SCVs, but that is recoverable. He lost the base, the SCVs, and the army, and another base on the high ground as well, because he didn't have the army to utilize the high ground. Very, very easy game for Shin. And, of course, I want to give kudos to his decision-making and his ability to be so active to find Maru in that weak spot, so on and so forth. But I would say one of the easiest wins for Shin versus Maru. And Maru just probably refusing to believe that it's real. His game was going almost as good as the last. He didn't have those Banshees that were doing damage, I guess is the difference. And obviously a Cyclone surprise didn't win the game straight off, which was probably the hope. But it was going about as good as last game. And then suddenly it just went to shit. But refusing to give up. He's got a mech army, he's got ghosts, he's got some good upgrades. And he believes that one bad engagement from Shin will allow him to take, you know, a couple of bases back. And that's not untrue. It's very possible that Shin gets over-eager in his attempt to win right here, right now, pushes into a choke with too many tanks, doesn't have the Vipers alongside him, and then does throw away too much army. Has to spend that time remaxing, and then that sliver of time, Maru not only remaxes himself, but also gets his bases back under control. But that's not going to happen, is it? Oh, it wasn't the Vipers coming up, it was the Infestors. They were all types of bunched up, though, so a simple scan and a couple of tank shots just killed so many Infestors. Holy shit. Oh my god, well that's actually... Nope, that is exactly what I was trying to describe. I didn't expect the Infestors, and initially, they looked good, and then they looked really freaking bad. Alright, but the point is, at the end of the day, that is a huge loss of resources there from Shin. He has the resources to replace it, there's been no question about that, as he has taken over the map. But this is the type of win that a mech player can usually depend on happening once, and then if it happens twice, they're back in it. They're back in the game. But Jesus, those infestors, they looked like they were going to be the endgame move, and then they're just freaking terrible. I guess the fact that literally not every single tank was neuroparasited meant that all it took was 1 or 2 tanks to hit the clump, and then it was... the strategy was defunct. Shin actually trying to change his strategy, realizing that just trying to win in that particular corner is not going to work out. Now starting to split up his units, but Maru has actually had a decent amount of army for a while at this point, so... that was only a portion of his army defending the third. You can see he does have other units up to the right side. He's actually been very good about keeping his Raven and Viking alive, which wasn't quite in place to the infestors from the get-go, but still helped eventually, I suppose. I don't know about pushing. He is not maxed out, and he certainly doesn't have a safety bank, but perhaps realizing that he really can't play out that super, super long game, wants to try and get something done to stop Shin from just taking over the game totally and entirely. And if Shin has to decide to remax on Roach Ravager, then that will take away a potential tech swap, which might be the first thing that Maru was worried about. If you allow the Zerg player to not just remax constantly on Roach Ravager, but then also give them a bunch of time to choose their technology, that can get worse and worse for you, as you do not have the economy to keep up with it, potentially. So Maru actually does successfully push it along that line that I was thinking he would. This space actually has been mined decent amounts in a situation which I thought it would never. But things really did change when this base was attempted. Maru now going to get that Rich Vespian Geyser with an orbital by the looks of things, but also under attack on his own base. Things are about to get a little screwy. Parasitic bombs on top of a couple of medevacs. We're probably more so looking at the Vikings, as we do not have a lot of anti-air, and the Broodlords are here. 8 Broodlords. 1 Viper, 8 Queens. That is the anti-air, guys. 4 Vikings and 3 Thors. If they're really, really well controlled, I guess could take that out. But the Queens are providing a little bit of safety as far as the anti-air and as far as the transfuse, although not if they go off creep, which they are dangerously close to doing. Lovely anti-air missile as well, and we are just A-moving the entirety of the mech army. The Broodlings not able to kill very much at all, especially because they are running into the Hellbats. Usually this is where Shin was pretty good about target firing the Ghost. He might have been trying, but unable to, and Maru's actually just pushing through here. Maru might have chosen the exact opportunity to win this game, as he also finally gets another base up and running, although no SCVs, no mules, and this is still such a large Zerg economy. I think you have to be very, very careful as the mech player. And here we go. We got a couple of units coming in from the backside, the left and the right, I suppose. Viper's finally coming in as well. The Ultra is actually able to tank enough to clear out some of these tanks. And the Hellbats had actually been distracted, so even the Lings came in to help take care of some of the tanks. And that's what happens when the Terran army gets disjointed, gets to be all over the place, has more units back at home hoping to defend than on the front lines. You see the pieces begin to fall, the dominoes begin to fall. And Maru's one-punch push will not win this game, and even the rally contributing further to the awkwardness here. And I think that will be it, because Shin still has a base mining, still has 3 bases mining, actually. His gas is a little bit weak, but Lings have been very, very effective this game. Another Mistburrow. I noticed the one earlier, but wasn't important. That was just awkward. I don't know, if Maru had not gotten disjointed, because his tanks were left kind of alone, the Hellbats had moved over to this base, the Thors were over here, if he was still in a ball, I'm pretty sure Ling Ultra would not have been very good. But he stopped being in a mech ball. It still was also going to be a problem of time, I suppose. Shin did have a lot of money, past tense, and so he would have kept on just running units in. But you can see how close it's gotten, man. Shin will eventually win this game. Not actually ending up being the easiest game that he's ever played versus Maru, but that break on the 5th base really set the tone. I mean, at that point, I thought Maru 100% was going to lose, which he eventually did. And GG's. Now into game 3. And now it's all tied up 1-1. We're on site Delta. Bottom right Shin, top left Maru. This time he doesn't go mech, right? I'm not going to say mech was his problem, because it really wasn't. But it definitely was a different map. And that absolutely contributed to Shin's find. His ability to get that big concave that catches the Terran player's reinforcements. as well as catches the rest of the army still being kind of too far away, basically. Because the fact that that ledge divides the bases as it does, and then the base you're truly protecting is so much farther forward than your high ground 4th base, it just means that your reinforcements are kind of left alone. And then a lot of your army that you had placed earlier on the high ground doesn't actually impact the fight off the high ground. So it does seem to be a tricky spot for the, even professional Terrans, whether it's mech or bio. We've certainly seen a lot of bio games in which a very similar circumstance happens. The tanks aren't involved in the fight. They're on the high ground. They're protecting the 4th. They're kind of protecting the 5th, but not really. And then the bio ball, ghost ball comes down the center path, and infestors or banelings or whatever jump on top of them. Happens a lot, actually. And I'm sure Maru is very aware of that, but might have been gotten up so much in his own momentum. The fact that he got all these bases up and running almost for free, is very seamless once again. He even got one on location, that he might have thought that he wasn't going to be under a lot of pressure, that he would lose so much in his attempt to defend that base. But it really did snowball. It wasn't just the army that was going to protect the base. It was the army reinforcing, plus the not quite big enough army around the 5th, plus the not quite big enough army defending the 4th. Yeah. It really, really snowballed. I think that map just contributes heavily to that style, of that potential. We're back to a map where I don't think that potential is quite there in the same way. It's a skinnier map, and it's one that does encourage kind of a direct path. You got a lot of rocks blocking out the multiple attack setups. You got a lot of high grounds that get set up as well. So if tanks siege up here, how does Shin exactly approach that? Or if they set up here, does he try and get a full surround set up from, 60 seconds prior? It's hard. But, I don't know. Maru, I was already surprised that he went for mech twice in a row. It did seem like he maybe kind of changed his mind, too, because he had a reactor on the barracks, but then didn't. But then he was placing it in kind of a secret position. I don't know. But we do it 3 times in a row. He went for a 1 Rax Expanse, Reaper into Marine. Then he went for a 3rd CC. Shin goes for 3 hatch setup. Doesn't have to worry at all about early game pressure either, so that speed coming in a little bit later. Maru might take this opportunity to try once again to send those Hellions in. He did that in the first game. Very ineffective, but he did try. It was the Banshees after that that were really the effective unit. That Reaper escaped. Okay. Sure. And now the starport is on the way. So, alright, so Hellions, what are you going to do? That's my first question. Shin's speed, not even halfway done. Do they just race across the map? Because otherwise, talking about a macro game. And then mech or bio. Viking. I'm going to say into the Liberator this game. Although the Banshees were very effective. Maybe he's thinking about that. Oh, that's a fake. That's not a misclick, that's a fake. The Overlord is moving in, so it might be a very appropriately timed fake. So he is going to do the Banshee thing again, but he's hoping that it'll be a real surprise this game. Last game, it wasn't a surprise. Like, he kind of tried to hide the cloak timing in the first game, remember? But, okay, well, he's kind of forced to actually do his plan. Oh, no. Oh, okay, well, that was actually really awkward. The timing. I would have been so frustrated if I was in Maru's position. If he had just waited a little while longer, he might have been rewarded with a surprise, which might have been worth the delay on the Banshee. But, oh well. Oh well. It is going to be Viking into Banshee, but it is not going to be a surprise, so that's kind of unfortunate. But good news for Shin, who really is looking for one of his first actual best of 3 wins. Mech it is, by the way. 3 times in a row. Not all that common. I know that Maru has talked often at this point, I would say. He talks fairly frequently about his wrist issues. So Dark's interview with Crank happened recently, and Dark mentioned that Maru told him that he didn't feel very fast in the game. And so Maru has talked about that. He's talked about, he only does one type of strategy when his hands feel really, really fast. And obviously, kind of the fastest strategy as a Terran player is that kind of more mass bio, hitting different locations all the time. The not so fast Terran strategy is more of a kind of drop here, drop there, and then push up the middle with Widowmines or tanks. Still pretty freaking fast, but not as much. And then there's obviously the slower pacing, which is 100% mech. So it could be a risk thing. It could be that he thinks that Shin is weak to it. Could be that he found something that he really likes about it. Whatever it is, but 3 mech games in a row. Spire is coming out really quickly for Shin. That is interesting. I don't like it. Since there's really no reason for Terran players not to open up mech with Cyclone.
You are doing something right,
if they're good. You know, if it's a pleb, do whatever you want. But if they're good, there's not really a reason, I would say, to not go for Cyclones initially. Well, Hellion and Cyclones, you know what I mean? Not just right into tanks. It used to be that there is a very, very, very big possibility that a quick Spire would find a Terran player with literally no anti-air. Especially if it wasn't scanned, which it is just scanned right now. But nowadays it doesn't. So the most you're hoping for is that it's not enough Cyclones, and you can build a lot of mutas. But that's hasn't really happened as far as I've seen. Anyway, the scan reveals the mutas, so Shin probably is already like, oh, never mind. You know, he won't cancel the Spire, but he won't be using it to build mutas, which I guarantee was his choice here. I don't think it was for a greater Spire, but now it might be. As the Infestation Pit finishes up. Very, very dangerous to do, though, on one of the shorter maps, one of the more direct maps, and after it's been scanned, of course. But he's actually going to produce 8 mutas. They are still, obviously, very mobile. They can actually still try and circumvent the Cyclones, and they can try and keep the Cyclones pinned back at home. So then it's like, you know, are you moving it to me? Are you moving out to me? Are you moving out to me? Do I counterattack? Do I counterattack? So there is that. And you might find some surprisingly good usage out of these 8 mutas. Missile turrets are being built. There won't be a weak SEV line, but like I said, maybe if they keep the Cyclones back at home, that keeps the pressure off of Shin. Another scan, because that was also where the lair was, does reveal that it is going to be a hive, and fairly quick, too. I believe that was a change of plans once the first scan went down. That's when he added the Infestation Pit. So very, very tech-heavy strategy coming out from Shin right now. With a solid economy, of course, as well. And Maru has not really had anything going wrong for him for this game. Does find in the turret's not quite completed in the main. That's the first thing that's gone wrong for him. He is on 4 bases. He will not have a lot of trouble with the mutas. And so Shin is on a very tight timing here. If he is actually going to try and get to Broodlords, it's going to be tough. Because when Maru is ready to push, and right now he's nowhere close to it, 130 supply, that's not it. But when he is ready to push, it's going to happen really, really fast. And he might start to try and even push off of 160 and rally forward and really push Shin to make some tough decisions. If there is that greater Spire, well, the upgrade's finishing for both Terran and Zerg. Muta is still trying to find something to do. 4 SCVs and the Cyclones kept back at home. Kind of worth the Mutas, I guess. Not really. Because on 4 bases, which Maru prioritized first and foremost, right, oh, he actually didn't have a 5th factory. That's a mistake most of the time. You can afford 5 factories on, well, 3 bases technically, but certainly on 4 bases. You can afford 8 factories on 4 bases. All right, well, I was going to say is that when your economy is settled, you can start busting out an army pretty quickly. That's true for every race. It's obviously the truest for a Zerg player. But Maru's ascent to a maxed out position with ghosts and upgrades happens kind of quickly. And blink and you miss it, but this Greater Spire is also happening very quickly, and it certainly seems like with the mutas consistently scouting, that Maru isn't going to push out. So Shin feels like he can actually get to it. He's going to need to sacrifice some army in a pretty decent way, which is exactly what he's trying to do to get the supply, but he'll be able to get there. And this is pretty damn decent. Tanks do get a couple of shots off for dying, but it's clearly not the position that the tanks wanted to take up close and personal to the roaches without more tank buddies behind them. Cyclone's finally involved, however, with tanks anchoring, and that will be a very dead Zerg army if it continues to commit. But, ooh, the missile turret in the main base went down. The mutas finding their time to strike contributes, I think, all of the SCV kills. Maybe a couple went down on the 3rd base, but that was basically all of the SCVs in the main base going down. Even a delayed barracks that's supposed to be building the ghosts. That is a good use of the mutas. They finally have paid for themselves and then some. But it was already a pretty good attack just with being able to kill 5 tanks, kind of independent of each other. That's already pretty good for a Zerg player. The Vipers also lived. One did die. So 2 Vipers lived, getting rejuiced, and you certainly haven't given the Terran a timing of which to counterattack, which is always the worry. As a Zerg player, you want to certainly balance the whole giving units away purposefully, but not too many, and then being able to actually remax on whatever you want to remax on before the Terran army counters. But Maru has clear intentions of getting to a 5th base and clear intentions of getting to a ghost setup. The barracks are there. They were seen by Shin. So it doesn't look like Maru is planning to attack anytime soon. Something that Shin should be taking advantage of at this point with 10 Corruptors and eventually Broodlords on the way. I mean, I guess, yeah. Particularly because Maru lost so many tanks here. This was not the defense of a choked-in 3rd that you would hope for as a mech player. Yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense. He would not get an opportunity to attack, but I thought the Broodlord edition would be much scarier. Oh, we had 7 Corruptors canceled. And it actually wasn't that scary. Shin with plenty of time to get there. Now the question more so is, do you actually want Broodlords? The Vikings are out. The Ghosts are coming out. The setup's still freaking strong. Nice sniper in the sensor tower. Doors are now coming out as well. Upgrades are finishing for the Terran player. Do you really want to get into Broodlords? Possibly. But what you're more likely hoping for is to get to a perfect Broodlord army, which is a lot of Broodlords and spellcasters. Without Fungals or Neuroparasite, Fungals for the Ghosts, Neuroparasites for the Thors, plus whatever Vipers can contribute, Broodlords really aren't that scary to a Terran player. They really aren't. Especially if they don't have that good of upgrades, and there are 0 air upgrades. There's also 0 melee upgrades, so the Broodlings literally don't have any upgrades whatsoever, as a projectile or as a melee unit. So against the +2 armor, +3 armor actually not yet gotten, which would be helpful. That's still very effective Thors, even effective Hellbats versus the Broodlings. And it's more likely that the friendly fire from the tanks will do damage than the Broodlings themselves. I don't know, man. I don't know. The Terran army is a little out of position, but its layering is okay. Hellbat's now getting on the front lines. Focus fire on the Thor does work out first, especially with the friendly fire helping out. Vikings late to the party, but they are here, and there's a decent number of them. That's 8 Vikings, more than you usually see. Corruptors are being lazy initially as well, finally coming on the front line to help. But the Thors have been destroying those Broodlords, and now it is only the Corruptors that are left over. The tanks eventually also forced to focus fire, continued to tear down the Roaches and the Queens. And the Hydras will not do the job by themselves. No sirree. And that's about like what I predicted, honestly. The only reason I think that even looked okay at the beginning is because the Terran army was a little out of position. The Hellbats weren't perfectly on the front lines. The Thor count was still kind of growing. And the tanks weren't initially controlled by Maru. They were getting friendly fire done. I think that those are all things that easily could have not happened, and it would have been a straight-up disaster for Shin. As it is, I'm not going to use the word disaster, but it wasn't that great. Doesn't give me a lot of confidence. Because Maru can continue making the same exact army that he has been making, where Shin has to scratch his head and say, what the hell do I do now? Do I go back into Broodlords and have a similar thing? Do I go back into Roach Hydra and try and overwhelm the guy? No, because his army didn't really die. If I go back into Broodlords, clearly I need something else besides Broodlords. Can I get there in time? Do I have enough gas for that? Well, this is maybe an awkward move up from Maru, actually. The Blinding Cloud taking his army out of the equation. Multiple Blinding Clouds, in fact. Finally, the Vipers do die. And there's not that much behind the army here for Maru. Where's the rest of his army? Did he move out too awkwardly? Shin actually presented a present right there. You should be sending Maru a thank you card, as Maru did not scan ahead, did not realize the army was ready to tango, and Shin is finding a moment to strike. One more Thor will die before all is said and done. SCVs died. That 4th orbital was delayed too. So it is down, but it's an orbital, not a planetary. And things have gotten so much more awkward than they should have. So much more awkward. The Ghosts are alive, but they're hardly protected. And they are running out of snipes as well. Individual tanks getting focus fire down by the remnants of the reinforcements, which is bad news for Maru, who really needs something, anything to come out right now. No planetary either, so more SCVs are going to go down. How did that turn so bad so quickly? Maru just not in the position to move out, and not really with a I think what he was thinking is that he could move out to clear up creep and to start taking his base. But he is once again caught in the worst possible position in transit, and then his own army kind of body blocked a little the retreat. Maru has one more chance to get maxed out, but this is just giving a whole new life to Shin, who now once again is the one completely in control of the economy, and he's in control of his tech choices. So, like, kind of anything goes at this point. Now, roaches do mostly squash together. Yeah, and that wasn't too good. Threw that choke, so that wasn't very pretty. That wasn't it. So Maru's still okay tank count. Like, as long as they have this choke to use, then 5 tanks is plenty to kill 20 plus roaches. We just saw it. And there's a little bit of a tit for tat, I suppose. Still overall more concerning for the mech player, who also hasn't really gotten their economy back up and running. The gases were destroyed. This is not yet a planetary, and it might only be a planetary, which would be something the Ravagers could corrosive bile down. No further protection. We got the Infestors once again. That's one good neuroparasites, but nothing else following it up. Scans are here, ghosts are here. Tanks once again properly using this choke. And only one unit neuroparasited, too, actually, at some point. Might not have been enough, or maybe it was barely enough. The roaches actually break through, jump on top of the remaining tanks, and Maru's reinforcements just not quite enough. Shin able to break through and cut Maru down to 115 supply. But this is as Maru takes at least a 5th base once again. I might have been calling it the 4th this entire time. My bad, guys. It's a 5th. So it's still kind of scary. Shin is going for the make or break type of army. He makes it and then he just breaks it. He either breaks Maru in the process or he breaks the entire army. He just throws it wave after wave after wave. And if it doesn't work, there's not a whole lot of subtleness to it. It's just another wave. But the problem with that strategy is that eventually mech gets to its critical mass, especially if it has its terrain to utilize. And then such a basic Zerg army no longer cuts it. Jumping on top of the planetary, however, is going to significantly cut into Maru's economy. Nice little concave as well as Shin takes on the planetary, now tackles the Hellbats, now trying to jump on top of the tanks as well. Ghosts are coming in for some of their snipes, so nothing protecting the tanks anymore. Shin holding on to a 50 supply lead, might get the upset of the century. His century anyway, because he has really never defeated Maru in a serious best of 3. Maru is not going to give up anytime soon. Somehow this command center, I think, has been floating over to the right side this entire time, is now going to come back. It's going to add a defensive planetary by the looks of things. Very tough decision for Maru to make, though. And that's actually a very poor place for a defensive planetary, because the high ground can be can corrosive bile it. Nothing else going on, by the way. Maru has no form of harassment. He's just trying to get to the critical mass of units that will hold on indefinitely against the wave of Zerg. But I'm afraid he's been broken one too many times. Coming in from 2 different directions. A little bit of SimCity at the very least with this command center is nice. And it looks like the south side did not go well at all for Shin. North side actually easier to defend for Maru, as he can pull the SCVs and lift the orbital, and that was not it. I actually thought the roaches, there was like 12 of them, I want to say. I thought they were getting at least 1 or 2 of these tanks. They didn't. Good repair. And then this command center ended up being a beautiful SimCity. No planetary needed. The SimCity alone was good enough, and we even saw a couple of Hellbats saved. I noticed that. I saw that. I thought it was almost comical because I didn't think it was going to help, but hey, he saved a couple extra Hellbats. Now, this is still a very, it's an extremely dangerous position for Maru to be in. By taking this base, he has now opened up so many attack paths to his army, and he doesn't have a lot of tanks. He's got an okay number at 9, but it's not enough to really cover 3 different locations. Possibly even 4, actually. Kind of forgetting this base could have been vulnerable. Shin also deciding, okay, you know what? That base could be vulnerable. Does go for it. SCVs evacuates. That's all they can do. No bother repairing that one. But the ghosts are going to come in for some serious revenge snipes. And I thought Maru was going to be broken when he was at 130 supply and attacked from 2 different directions. Now I will flip my prediction. Maru getting over the hump of the 150 supply, getting close to that critical mass, if not already at it. And his ghost count is amazing. I mean, you really can't forget about that. 15 ghosts is pretty freaking good. He might have actually done it. And Shin, you know, certainly not going to do anything here with it coming in through one choke. I'm actually really surprised he's doing this. A couple of Lings come in from the left, and that's not enough. Banelings that are slow trying to come in as well. That's a really odd choice. A couple of tanks do get picked off, but that was not overwhelming whatsoever. That was so many roaches for just a couple of tanks, and there's a lot more behind that. You know, when you find a Terran who only has a couple of tanks, obviously the ghosts were there, so it wasn't just tanks. You really want to overwhelm that. And then their spacing of the tanks ends up kind of working against them, because so many tanks aren't involved in the fight. So you want to overwhelm it as fast as possible. But he didn't overwhelm it. He just killed 2 tanks, and then the ghosts were there to either add the damage or get the revenge snipes as the Zerg army tries to retreat. Banelings, once again, still slow, trying to hit the heart of the ghost. So freaking unlikely. And Shin is maybe getting a little sweaty at this point. Things have suddenly turned. Like, wait a second. My base is under attack. My gas is really low. He didn't take these left bases when he could have. And then, actually pretty scary. This is actually bad news, man. 2 bases about to be cut off here. Nice scan. Gonna see those infestors and get the EMP. Yes, they will. So no fungal on the ghost, which means they can also be picked up very nicely with the Medivacs. One does go down, but the hatchery falls, and this hatchery will soon to fall as well. Maru's also had that fresh injection of economy thanks to this 6th base being up and running. And the ghost just will remain ever alive, easily pulling back from the banelings off of creep as it is. Roach is trying to get the last tank there, but can they get the rest of the ghost? The reinforcements coming in from Maru are actually being kind of intercepted at this point, but the planetary is also there to help in this case. So yes, the tanks will be destroyed, but the ghosts hold on strong, and that is really what's keeping Maru in this game. They have been cold. 7 ghosts have died in the last couple of minutes here. A lot of tanks also going down. The reinforcements were certainly awkward, but that planetary is now a really tough thing for Shin to bust. He's no longer kind of free remaxing, you know. He is struggling, particularly because of the gas, to get remaxed even on a basic Roach army, so it's not going to be a pummeling as much as it is just a steady flow, I suppose, of Zerg army, which is more predictive that, you know, Maru can actually kind of say, okay, this attack is going to be like this, and I can do that. As opposed to, well, what got him into the trouble in the first place, which was moving out into the unknowing embrace of a maxed out Zerg army. It can be a little more predictive, although now going after this base, I guess it's gonna work out. Shin not confident quite yet. Needs to wait for the rest of his army to get up here. But I feel like the rest of his army, once here, especially with the fungals, it's scanned. It is scanned. Would be good enough against this. It is going to be good enough. Nice EMP on the Vipers. But the Infestor is still with energy. Good pick up on whatever units he can. Every little bit matters after all. And now this is a little bit more of a choke to utilize, so I do like that. Nice focus fire on the Infestors. Gets 2! Third one will survive, but no spellcasters involved in this fight. That, again, is now going into much more brutal of a choke, so the couple of tanks reinforcing will do wonders there. And Maru really wants to kill this base, so he can also probably get it, because he does have this extra base waiting. That's exactly what he's looking for. We got an attack to the middle of the map, as we also have the defense of the hatchery, but this is a lot of mech army, and it is certainly enough to take care of the roaches, no problem, especially with the tanks sieging. The run back to the middle of the map isn't really finding a whole lot, and actually won't even cut off the reinforcements. And Shin is now absolutely, completely broke. Ling's trying to get some surrounds on the Ghost, mostly for the friendly fire effect. Ghosts are able to sneak out and will survive with the medevac pickup if they have to. And they do have to. That is just enough coming through here. The Ling's really contributing to that type of army. There weren't a whole lot of Hellbats to help out right there. So Maru will be broken, but he's got the planetary to fall back to. This is an orbital, however, and the Lings are once again jumping on top of kind of unprotected tanks. Only a couple of Hellbats there to help out, but Ghost still getting those snipes, still getting the DPS. 20 SCVs do go down. Ling's actually getting so much of this damage. It's really the Ling special right now. Shout out to the Lings. But is it going to be enough? Especially as Maru goes, oh, okay, you're making mostly Lings. This could just be a beautiful ploy against what is a Hellbat-light army, or it could be a sign of desperation. And it is kind of both. Shin is desperate. He does not have gas. And once you realize that they're mostly depending on Lings, you can build Hellbats. Trust me. You can find some pocket change as a Terran player to build a couple of Hellbats. And with Blue Flame and 3/3 done, the Hellbats win against the Lings every time, even if these Lings have +3 melee. It'd be so ineffective of a trade to use Lings against Hellbats. Case in point, more Hellbats arrive, and the Lings just look stupid. This base will eventually be gotten by Maru, and these Lings get destroyed. Shin was, as I was saying, kind of late taking these bottom left bases. He has this one for a while, but he never took this one, so he's been missing the opportunity to get more gas. And I'm not going to say it would change the course of this game, but I am going to say he could have gotten it faster. And now it looks like Maru's army is just unbeatable. Shin, relying so much on the Lings, gets massacred by the Hellbats that are also being healed by the Medivacs, just to really make them the most powerful possible Hellbats. And that is going to be it. Maru, not going to give Shin victory. No, sir. And Shin was so freaking close to it, man. I really thought he had it. I really thought he had it. There is at least, I want to say, 3 points in which I was certainly Shin favored. But Maru still got it, man. And so he gets first. He gets first in the GSL group. Definitely an improvement from his last GSL run. And Shin will have to wait for the winner of soO versus DRG. Coming up next. So some more ZVZ action. All ZVZs from here on out, actually, as Maru did place first in the group. In the top right, we do have the blue Zerg soO. In the bottom left of Solaris, it is the red Zerg DRG. So the winner of this will have a chance to face Shin in another ZVZ. Winner of that will advance alongside Maru. And no one has been eliminated yet, but this is the elimination match. And I've said it before in the DRG Shin series, but I do favor kind of a lot of other people, I guess, aside from DRG. I didn't say it like that, to be fair, but that's basically what I was thinking. I thought Shin would be the winner of their best of 3, and he was, but it was close. At least the first 2 games. Was it a best? Was it 1-1? Anyway, the last game was not close, but the other games were close in DRG and Shin. So it's not like DRG can't do anything. But Shin has been the player who's been playing consistently. He didn't go to the military, and he is, one to usually get far in brackets, actually, despite my attempt to stop him, I suppose. Despite my predictions always being he's not going to get very far, Shin always gets pretty far. So anyway, soO isn't up to that level. soO is definitely more around the DRG situation, which is that he is recently, I guess, but he's returned from the military, and he's never gotten back to his form, his GSL winning form. So they're a lot more similar than the DRG Shin series, but in my opinion, in my bias, I guess, I would put soO as the potential winner here. Even though DRG has shown ZVZ that's very good, even though DRG has gotten farther in some of the recent GSLs than soO, I don't know. I'm really feeling it for soO. He had a very, very good performance versus Maru. DRG obviously not getting the opportunity to be tested versus Maru, so that's not exactly fair, but that's just my gut feeling right now. Doesn't matter one iota, though. DRG can obviously win. So we got 2 base versus 2 base so far. Slightly different openers, actually, as you can see with the gas counts. DRG for a later gas. Slightly faster pool, and so slightly faster queens. And that's the difference so far. Shin is probably the most likely out of any of the Zergs to go for a 2 base all-in, because it's not very common in professional scene, but it is a ZVZ. And it is Korean ZVZ. And when it's Korean ZVZ, even Solar, who's known for his macro game, will go for the cheeses. So you always got to keep that in mind, no matter who you're facing, no matter who you are. It's the better way to play. And so soO is certainly keeping that in mind, as he sends 2 Lings to the main base. This is pretty much the anti-2 base Ling attack scout. There's not many other ways to do it, except for, seeing the Lings on the way with the Overlord. But obviously, if this was a particularly fast lair, which it actually is, then that was also hoping to scout that. But of course, DRG is going to wait to produce the lair once the Lings are actually dead, as the surprise factor is certainly worth the delay. But soO's going to know that something is up, something different than what he is doing, because his Overlord is seeing a lack of third base, either direction. So it's at least different. Doesn't mean that it's a lair, doesn't mean that it's mutas, doesn't mean that it's roaches. Anything could happen. It could also mean that it's actually still speedlings, honestly, that are being bunched up behind here for all he knows. Although he did see that speed wasn't even started. But still, there's a lot of things you can do behind a 2-base build. soO just knows it's not a 3-base build. And actually, soO's response to this is go ahead and break the guy. And I'm not sure DRG is quite prepared for this. He did not realize it was on the way until, of course, this Overlord saw it. So this evolution chamber, there we go. Yeah, not healthy enough. Banelings coming on the left side. Beautiful maneuver there from soO, who had those lings up there to set up the fastest possible Baneling bust. If those Banelings had to wait to be produced with the lings flooding here, then that is a much healthier evolution chamber and a much better defense from DRG. But as it is, it's game over. GG's. All right. Good response from soO. Really important he had those Banelings already produced. An evolution chamber at 60% health wouldn't have gone down to 4 Banelings, I don't believe, yeah. And that would have been the big difference. So, really nicely done there from soO, who was like, you're doing something a little sneaky, and I'm going to try and catch you before you do whatever you are doing. If it was lings being produced, my Banelings would help against that. If it was roaches being produced, a couple of roaches would not hold up against the surround from my own lings. And if it was mutas, you don't have anything. So, he figured there's a weak point, and he was absolutely right. Lickety split in game 2. I think soO might have done some casting when JYP wasn't available, and then TY wasn't available. I think soO was like the third backup. The second backup. In a sub 5-minute game, this man takes game 1. It is soO. On the bottom right, it is DRG. DRG having a problem with his 2-base, I guess. Because I think that's the... It wasn't the same exact build that he did versus Shin, but it was the same kind of setup where he needed a wall. In the game versus Shin, it was really weird because I thought he knew he needed a wall, but then his queen just didn't give a fuck. He was like, okay, bye! But that game, he obviously saw that he needed a wall, but very, very late. He gets the wall set up, but it is so early on in its development. It's weak, doesn't have a lot of health. A couple of Banelings do end up being the difference there. And if the Banelings are available at that point, and the evolution chamber, I don't know why I can't say that. If the Evo didn't get slapped down the moment the Overlord saw it, if a couple of Lings got in and saw it, or he just walled because he was paranoid for some reason, that Evo is healthy enough to hold longer. It holds longer, so the queen from the high ground gets involved, then more Lings pop out to help defensively. Maybe you even get a secondary wall set up, which he was kind of trying to do. There's a lot of ifs. The Ling flood is a game of seconds, isn't it? Whether it's a 2-base Ling flood or a 3-base Ling flood or any type of Ling flood, actually. Because the wall is obviously a seconds problem. The production of your own units can be a seconds problem. The queen movements can be the seconds problem, just 1 second away from blocking that ramp. So it's a cruel matchup, that's for sure. And one whose cruelty isn't favoring DRG right now. And also, again, kudos to soO's killer instinct. He saw something a little weird going on and said, nah, not gonna play that game. Just build a bunch of Lings. And otherwise, had a very normal, solid setup until he started to spam those Lings.
Warning. Philanthropist programs detected.
So will we have an equally fast second game is the question. DRG just not getting the best opportunities to shine in ZVZ in a group that is mostly ZVZ based. Would he have had a better chance against Maru? I certainly don't think so. So I'd actually say that ZVZ's being his primary practice would make a lot of sense. But it is a matchup that feels like you can practice it all you want. You often aren't getting the best practice, I think. And then you can't practice against, I feel like, everything that can happen in ZVZ. And the reason I say they don't get a lot of practice or a lot of good practice is that it is a fact, actually. It is known. Across the regions, there really aren't as many top-tier Zerg. Certainly as there once was. It used to be basically the Protoss around to Europe. That's what Zerg was to everywhere else. And now, because of that, you also, like, are really what's the word? You're really scared to show off your ZVZ, I guess. So you don't necessarily want to find a practice partner, because then that practice partner might be the Zerg that you're facing eventually. So you just revealed all your secrets, and ditto, I suppose, but it gets a little weird. That's what we heard from the Zerg players who talked about it anyway. But, okay, can't have much time to talk about anything besides this game, because once again, soO's going to go for a 3-base Ling Flood. He's going to follow this up with a Roachmoran, though, so it's not going to be, yeah, nothing but Lings. We do see drones starting to be produced as well. Let's give a momentary heart attack to DRG, as he is forced to respond, of course. He has to build his own Lings and maybe a couple of Banelings, which he is already doing, but now it is the classic Ling-Baneling micro war, one in which we expect both players to be roughly equal on. So nothing should be determined at this point. But there are things happening behind the scenes that more so determine how this game goes. And for instance, while we do see 1 or 2 drones being produced by soO, he is mostly holding on to his supply and to his resources. He's going to go for an all-in. So that's far more important. DRG is trying to be on the level. He's trying to get just enough defense for this attack, but also go into drones, because he figures soO is probably doing the same thing. As his Lings head across the map and see no drones at the 3rd, he'll realize that soO 100% was not doing the same thing. But is he too late to his Roachmoran? It's only halfway done as he realizes what exactly is going down now. soO is going to have slow roaches marching across the map, flooded with Lings after that, and DRG has 9 extra workers taking away from his production. He could try and wall up his natural and then sacrifice his 3rd, but that would just be a very awkward situation regardless. It wouldn't actually put him that far ahead, if at all. And, well, his queens are now going to be found out as well. That's less than ideal. A couple of transfuses can make or break a defense, but now missing 1 queen. These queens also in danger as the Lings do go for this round yet again. DRG, no idea why his queens were out there for so long, but it probably doesn't matter. I mean, look how late his defenses are. This 1 roach pops, this 1 spine crawler pops. Finally, more roaches appear. A couple of extra queens would not have made a difference, probably. Again, 3 transfuses would be helpful. But yeah, that's going to be it, man. soO, realizing that DRG, weak to some of these earlier all-ins, takes full advantage of it. And DRG is going to be 0-2'd, 0-2'd. Wait, is he? He's going to be 0-2 in the group overall and be first to be eliminated. My memory's really going, guys. But soO now gets a second chance at life here. He gets to play another ZVZ versus Shin to try and make it to the next stage of the GSL. The decider match is here. In the bottom right, we do have the blue Zerg Shin. On the top left, it is the red Zerg soO. So, soO gets his second ZVZ, right? Everyone's played 2. Shin looks really good against DRG, but then so did soO. So that's not really telling us a whole lot. Both of these players looked promising against Maru, so that doesn't really tell us a lot. As far as their history, I still can't check it because the Ligalac's down for me for some reason. Just hates me in particular. But it would only matter kind of in the last couple of months, and I don't know how often they've played in the last couple of months. My gut says that Shin is the favorite. As I said, basically similar to the Shin DRG situation. soO is the one that's the returnee. He's the one that went to military, came back. He's never been up to his championship form, whereas Shin has basically been consistent, kind of, I guess. Like, he is more likely going to surprise you with wins in deep bracket runs than the other 2 I mentioned, DRG and soO. So while he can also have a very poor performance, he can sometimes really falter. Generally, we expect bigger and better things, and certainly every time we start to stop expecting them, we're like, oh, I don't know, Shin maybe isn't actually as good as we thought he was. You know, he had that GSL, but then I don't know, afterwards it wasn't that great. That's when he does really, really good again. So, he lulls you into a false sense of security. He makes the players believe that maybe he's not the toughest guy in the group, but then he, you know, wins it or something. And he was pretty close to winning this group, defeating Maru. But anyway, so that's why I favor him. But soO, definitely deadly in the matchup. He certainly showcased that versus DRG. And might actually be more of the aggressor. I really don't know. Both players, as Zerg in ZVZ, very capable of being very aggressive. Both players, as far as their professional career, known for being fairly aggressive. Shin known for maybe some more weird aggression. Shocking aggression. But soO has always been a very aggressive player, perhaps more in the mid game, I guess. It's like there's really not a lot of stark contrasts between the two. They're maybe even fairly similar. But one has had very, very, very good performances in the last 6 months, and the other one, soO, has had, okay. It's alright. ZVZ is anyone's game. We got speed coming out much, much faster for Shin because soO just simply didn't get speed. I don't know why he didn't get speed. Is he gonna cancel it and then go into a lair? Oh, he's got a queen on the way. That's supply blocked. What the hell is going on? Okay, there's the lair. It still feels very odd though, right? Evolution chamber now comes down. Could have been a much faster lair, but then you also have to worry about that Ling scout. I mean, he's... Yeah, that might have been it. But then the Overlord not being quite as fast as it should have. The Queen block. I don't know. It's a bit weird. But it is going. It's moving on. We're moving on. Third base coming down for Shin, who is going to notice the lack of third base. Exactly what I mentioned in the last CVZ. But flip the players. soO is the one going for the 2-base layer. And what happens behind the 2-base is anyone's guess. We know, but it's any player's guess. Shin can think of at least 3 different things that could be happening. Speedlings being balled up, Spire coming down, Roach Flood, Nidus Worm even, or a macro game. Slower macro game. You can get the third base up and running, but a macro game nonetheless. One that basically matches the third hatch because you have a lot of safety, you feel safer in droning. Sometimes you even see the 2-hatch player actually ahead on drones for a decent amount because the 3-hatch player does have to be a little bit scared as to what they're doing. But Shin is certainly not scared, and Shin is droning and droning and droning while also having a better spread of drones. So that means he is getting ahead economically. I feel like the danger of doing what soO is doing, this kind of just like slow build into a third base that's very safe, it is very good against an uncertain opponent who's like, oh, I don't know, like, what could you do? What could I do? Oh my god. Or an opponent who is more likely to be aggressive, who is going to make 30 lings, try and draw out that type of engagement, and try and do something sneaky. And then you're very well protected against that. But if you play against a guy who reads what you're doing and reads correctly that it is just going into a third hatch and then into roaches, obviously they can get the same amount of drones or even better and still have enough of the income of the larva of the minutes here to actually get enough roaches to defend. And that's exactly what's happening. Shin has seemingly read soO like a book. I think he's done this almost perfectly. +1 missile will be done for both players as the engagement happens. 7 extra roaches for soO, but defender's advantage kicks in for Shin. Roach speed also done for soO, but if it's the numbers, then the ability to micro might not matter as much. And Shin is starting to come up on the numbers of soO. Reinforcements not coming in fast enough for our red Zerg player as Shin is going to hold on with 6 more drones this entire time. And yes, he is absolutely going to hold on. I can't believe the queen made its way over here, but apparently it did. And soO's plan has just not done the trick. This can be a lot scarier. A lot scarier for soO. Wait, no, for Shin. Sorry, for Shin. If he's been kind of like, oh, I don't know. I built a couple of lings, then I built a couple of drones, then I built a couple of lings, then I built a couple of drones. That would have been a lot worse. But his play was pretty freaking clean. It would have been better for soO if he had been uncertain. It also would have been better for soO if he had a guaranteed escape. His roach speed was at least going to give him the ability to flee except Shin's roach speed also finished. So Shin was able to chase down a handful extra roaches, ensure that he has a bigger and better army as he commits more to his army supply and not into building drones. soO did try to build up to the drone count of his opponents and a little then some, but now his weakness is his army. Thus, the ebb and flow of ZVT does continue, but Shin is the one that's in command. He might not win right here, right now, but killing the drones here is going to be good enough to put him in the lead. And he does have more reinforcements on the way, so he believes that he can do it. soO barely holding on thanks to the drones, but now they're gone. Now it's just good old-fashioned roaches, and he actually built drones behind this. Oh, I guess he thought that Shin wasn't going to commit. But this is a problem, actually. Like, he needs to build... It's a conundrum, obviously, for soO, who needs to build up the drones that he just lost in the defense. But if Shin is just doubling down on the all-in, then soO might still not have enough army. I call it an all-in, but it's like a dedicated attack is more apt. But that's a serious concern. soO, and still going into more drones. He's going to once again be ahead in drones, but again, very behind, very, very behind in the army. If soO could somehow buy enough time to get that +2 done, then that might just push him over the edge as far as like a 15 army supply deficit, especially if he has enough Ravagers to, perpetually buy time, then that can actually cover quite a large army deficit. But that's the question. Can he get to that point? Can he get to +2 missile? Can he get to enough Ravagers to actually impact this upcoming engagement? I don't think so. 4 Ravagers only going to buy him a second. If that! One of them actually gets caught up in the front lines. 2 of them, 3 of them, all of them going to go down. Alright then. Shin, with a pretty confident display right there, knew he could get the kill and still win out on the Roach v Roach game. 15 seconds prior to that +2 attack finishing. Not that I'm sure that would have made the difference. So many more Roaches are available for Shin here as we close in on the end of game 1 of this best of 3. That's actually one of the more understandable wins, honestly. From CVC in my eyes. Shin saw what soO was doing, basically correctly said, I can build this many extra drones compared to you and still have enough defense. He was 100% correct about that. No need to pull his own drones to defend. And then he would have that benefit of having a consistent economy to almost always have himself in the lead. Almost always. And he played it out well. So GG's, Shin. Very convincing game 1 victory. soO's going to try something different next game. Game 2 is going to be on hard lead. In the bottom right, up 1, he is Shin. Top left, as the red surrogate, is soO on his last life as far as advancing to a GSL round of 8. Shin is firmly in the lead. And that's what I kind of expected, I guess, Shin winning, but the actual game wasn't what I expected. I really empathized with soO, who, I think might have been predicting that Shin would make 10, 14 lings. Enough to prod and poke and potentially play out a bit of a, canceled third hatch game if that's where soO was going to. soO obviously didn't go to it. But then Shin didn't just make anything, it wasn't that he didn't make anything in response, right? Because as soon as he sees what the setup is for soO, okay, yeah, you could just not make lings. It's that Shin was probably more likely to do something before the game is really situated. Make his 4 lings, try and get the desperate scout, worry about what soO is doing, get a couple of cautionary lings just in case. That's the type of uncertainty that soO's really solid plan would take advantage of. Because if Shin has 6 less drones for 40 extra seconds and then builds the drones and then goes into the army, that might have been 6 less roaches, totally throwing out random numbers right now. That then would have allowed soO's very direct plan, this, and then this, might have made that very direct plan actually work. But Shin had, 0 unnecessary production. He droned correctly, he droned just enough to get the advantage, but not to over-drone. Then he built army. Nothing went wrong. And I think that's just the weakness of that type of strategy that soO chooses, is that there is a chance that the other Zerg player just does everything, and it's actually a very, it's a very organized response, It doesn't create the chaos that a lot of other Zerg builds do. The problem with trying to change your mind or change your game plan now that that didn't work out is that Shin could 100% just go for a Ling Bailing bust, you know? Like, you're like, oh, I won't play that game because Shin will be just like a macroer and it won't work out, or he just will be responding to me the entire time, and that's not going to work out favorably for me. No, Shin could absolutely just try and kill you right now with a 2-base all-in. 100%. He's not, but he could. Confidence, pretty big thing in StarCraft. I feel like Shin is sometimes overconfident, but that's what gets him wins. You know, he pushes when no one else would, and he wins with it, and you're like, okay, all right. As Wardy says, what did he say? Shin's playstyle is like rolling the dice. Either comes up heads or tails. Dice don't have heads or tails, but that's how Shin plays. Yeah. These Lings of soO are really trying to get some scouting done. All so far they've seen is a Baneling Nest on the front. Ditto on soO. They are both doing very identical things right now. Look at that tiny little Baneling Nest. Look at this. Here's a boo-boo. Anyway. They're both adding on the Baneling Nest defensively. Basically, I mean, one player can always really go for a heavy Ling Baneling commitment. I would say I haven't really seen that as far as a basic 3-hatch, then Baneling Nest, then Ling production. Usually it's a front. They're trying to get the bad micro from their opponent while they're really doing a Roach-Warren attack, or they're really droning behind it. They don't just all go for Ling Baneling, Ling Baneling, Ling Baneling. And that's what we're seeing here. You know, you gotta be careful, of course, because occasionally someone does take extreme losses in these little Ling Baneling pokes, and then them trying to drone does really hurt them. But as we see, it's kind of gone as expected. Maybe someone won out technically on the trade of the Banelings there, but it's about what's behind this. And Shin is going into Roaches, whereas soO is a little later to the Roach-Warren. Not a little later, he's much later, actually. He's getting an Evolution Chamber, and he's getting drones. Shin is going to go for the attack. He sees the Evolution Chamber of his opponents. soO has not actually seen the front of the base again. Oh, he's only now seeing it. Oh no, I think if he had seen the front of the base with the Ling attack that was denied on the front here, if he had seen that it was a Roach-Warren and no Evolution Chamber, that should really just be a warning sign. It's not a guarantee that I guess that's going to be an all-in, but it's a big warning sign. Most of the time, the macro setup is exactly what soO has done. Faster Evolution Chamber, slower Roach-Warren. But he didn't see it, and now his response to this Roach-Ling flood is much later. The Banelings are going to try and connect with Shin's Lings, but so far not so good, as the Roaches also just stand strong. Don't have to worry about a surround at this point. soO is trying to buy time to his own Roaches, but now they're coming out one at a time. Spinecrawler will finish, but gets like one shot off. That is going to be it. Ravager finishes as well, and that's going to add a decent amount of, well, I was going to say DPS, but we do need some more units here. Shin is reinforcing with 26 Lings, but they are only popping as I am speaking, so he will be pushed back, at least temporarily. Shin's Lings might come in to help save the day, but the Corrosive Bile did not end up contributing whatsoever. And soO will actually hold the 5-worker advantage, mind you. So even though he was later to knowing that was on the way, he was just barely in time. He had a decent number of Lings. His Roach-Warren has produced enough Roaches, even if they're coming out one at a time. And he will hold. Shin still looking for a run-by. And soO's wall is a little awkward. There's actually 2 openings here. Oh my god, he actually goes for the surround. Now, this was prior to soO having the +1 missile, but now the +1 missile is done. But it looks like the surround will still be effective enough. It killed the Lings. It killed the Spine. It killed the Roaches. The rest of the Roaches had moved over to the right side, missing out from the main engagement, which means that Shin finds that damage on the army, and now is going to find some damage to the economy. That is not at all what soO was hoping for, because he certainly had enough of an army to deflect that. He just had 7 Roaches elsewhere. And if that +1 had been done the entire engagement, that also might have been a very big difference. That sucks, because that's basically his lead gone. He still had those 7 drones mining a little bit longer than Shin's, I suppose, but that lead is gone. A couple of Overlords in awkward positions, but Shin will be able to replace those as they fall. Shin actually building a Spinecrawler, recognizing there is a potential problem here. Don't know if he was really certain about the Roach speed timing either. Oh no, he saw the lair finishing, so never mind. So he knows that Roach speed isn't in effect. So if he is attacked, it would take a long time for soO to really get a good engagement, but still kind of concerned. Spinecrawler was formed and then canceled as the concern waned. I mean, that's a pretty good move right there. I guess soO also having such a faster +1 missile is quite scary. Shin moving out onto the map without +1 missile and without Roach speed as fast as his opponent. Probably shouldn't. Maybe presenting a bit of a front, letting the overseer see his Roach's move. Because his actual plan is getting to a Spire. I do believe that Spire is relatively safe. Shin's +1 will finish before any engagement comes through here, guys. And then his Roach speed will be down as well. And then he'll have defender's advantage in general to work with. So I think the Spire is safe. It is going to be scouted, though, and soO might pull the trigger. It really would not be a great timing for him. The Spire is 200 and a drone away from the resources that usually would go into Roach production. But is that enough to take away the power or defender's advantage? That is the question right now, as soO does pull the trigger, goes for the attack, +1's done, Roach speed will finish. Shin has everything that soO does, and defender's advantage. He's got the queens pulled to the forefront. He can always pull the drones as well if he really needs to, but I'm not sure that he needs to. A couple of Corrosive Biles adding in here is nice for soO, but here come the rest of Shin's reinforcements, obviously prioritizing Roach production over hoarding for the Spire, and soO's attack actually falls flat on its face, and it only delays the Spire X amount, not very long at all. And in fact, soO is going to lose these expensive Ravagers to Shin chasing. soO's reinforcements coming in just not in big enough numbers. They're actually losing even more so, and there is always the threat of the Mutas popping out. soO just not able to find any damage, and really not really making it that awkward of a game either. Shin now a little bit awkward as he does over chase. He is now forced to flee, and we'll have to cancel this fourth. That was a very bold fourth. All right, then. You think you have to cancel that fourth base, but here's more reinforcements. Shin was holding off on building Mutas for quite a time. Now with enough resources, get to 7, and they will pop out and control the map. I don't know if soO has any amount of defense. His fourth base might be up, but it is not defended by a Spore Crawler. Third, no Spore. Second, no Spore. Oh my god! Oh my god, what are you doing? Oh my god! He has like 6 drones. Not doing anything. Oh my god, how long is that happening? Oh, this could be a completely different game. That could have been happening for 2 minutes. I wouldn't have noticed. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, that sucks so much. This could be such a different game. I'm pretty sure this would all be red, at the very least. This would be less of a dramatic dip, maybe. I don't know. Jesus. Oh, that sucks. That really sucks. soO might have been struggling in the game overall anyway, but that would have been how many extra Roaches? Alright, well, the Mutas are now out, and while the Spore Crawlers do finish, they're very fast buildings, the Mutas still control the game, which is always obnoxious. But finding them on this side of the map, soO decides that maybe the Roach numbers will be a little weak, goes for the attack. He does have +2 versus +1. He is jumping on top of the 4th hatch. That is looking awfully ripe for the pickings, but the Mutas do return. They will focus fire the Ravagers, and while they won't kill the Roaches all that fast, it's free damage. So with Shin having a decent number of Roaches alongside the Mutas, soO realizes he can't really find the success he was hoping for. Shin, with a stronger economy, 6 extra workers, is down in that upgrade. We got the Mutas to help out, and might even move on to just, well, he might win, actually. He's up 30 army supply, so maybe just numbers will do the trick. I was going to say maybe he moves on in technology, but that ain't his plan. He maxed out, he goes for the throats, and soO is not going to be able to defend despite having the superior upgrade. He just did not have the numbers, and you gotta wonder how long those 6 drones weren't mining, man. If it was anything longer than 15 seconds, it's absolutely devastating. That is game. Shin will move on to the round of 8 alongside Maru for our first group of the GSL. And soO and DRG will have to wait to participate in Season 2. I know soO's kind of hanging on, but is he though? Is he though? Not really. A lot more roaches coming through for Shin. Eventually, the upgrades will also be even, and Shin will still have the armor supply advantage and the economic advantage. I won't fast forward, but this, yeah, I could. And there's that +2 missile in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Even upgrades, 30 extra supply. Roach battle. Oh, the corrosive bile barely didn't kill Shin's Ravagers. No. The hatchery goes down. soO might try and go for his own all-in. Pull the drones. Pull the drones? No? Okay. Freebie Overlords. Not that soO is supply blocked yet. Doesn't have the supply. soO is on his last life, so I absolutely am not discouraging him from staying in the game. I'm not judging. But he is unfortunately very dead. Very dead. And I will fast forward. Because I want to see how long those drones were mining. There it is, GG. It's around here. When did I notice it? Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. I don't know how he did that. Huh, alright, so from 9:40... Oh, to 10. So about 20 seconds. It actually wasn't that long, but it still sucks. That still sucks. Because that was still when the game's on a pretty razor-thin edge, so... womp womp womp. And there you have it. Maru and Shin advance. GG's. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the GSL Group B. Will be up very, very soon.